Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Emancipation Network and Zero Books American Election Special for the 2020 American Water Torture Slow Drip of election news. We have a big full panel tonight, and I'm going to start with our special guests. Well, I guess I'll start. Hi, I'm Esri. This is Sophia. You know us. And I guess from Swampside Chats, and we're from Jumpsuit Utopia. I'm on Mortal Science with, one of those dudes over there. And I think it's time to introduce our special guests. Hailing from Oakland, California, we've got Jason Miles from the This Is Revolution podcast. Jason, how you feeling?
I'm feeling great. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I feel very, very honored to be in a room with such smart people.
Oh, man. Okay. I'm choked up. I'm all for clumped. I'll give you a topic. JG Michael from Parallax Views is joining us for the first time on one of these roundups. Hi, JG.
Hey, what's up? It was a long time coming. I wanted to come on Emancipation Network at some point. So glad we finally got this together. Awesome.
Yeah, from the battleground state of Pennsylvania outside of Pittsburgh. So, right. And more familiarly, let's go to Kyle Thompson, hailing from Calgary, who, that's Canada, right? You can't vote in this election, right?
I cannot vote, and yet somehow I still got vote shamed.
Well, that's about the level of effectiveness of vote shaming anyway. It's not really a consequence-based activity. So I think that makes a fair amount of sense, but I hope you're feeling well on this evening and not too, going into the election death spiral that us Americans are.
No, I feel like I'm over the hump with it. I'm feeling better. The cloud that has been weighing upon my mind has lifted. Even as it's going into just quibbling over every single vote, I feel like the voting is over, and so just the extreme pressure on everyone is lifting right now.
Excellent. That's good to hear. It's good to hear an outside take. Another outside take, hailing from 1:00 in the morning in London. We have Comandante Alpha, Tom O'Brien himself. Yes, bringing the Irish heat in the heart of the beast in London, and the heart of the other beasts, and hopefully you can share your takes before we watch you pass out on camera. So how you feeling? How you feeling tonight? Besides very tired.
Good. I've taken a lot of sedatives, so hopefully soon I'll be slurring my speech just like Joe Biden. I'm looking blah, 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 blah.
How fitting.
Sleepy Joe.
Sleepy Tom. Next, from just above where we're at in Phoenix, Arizona, battleground state, to the more predictably question mark red state of Utah, we have C. Derek Varn hailing from Salt Lake City. Derek, how you doing?
I'm okay. I'm here on the west side, which is mostly Latino, and who knows who anybody voted for, if they voted at all. And we have mail-in ballots, and the Republicans still won, so they can chill about that. Let's see, what else? I'm actually feeling really good too, but for a slightly different reason. I feel good because everybody, period, has been wrong, and including myself. And it is such a palate cleanser when everybody's wrong that it's just like, oh, well, pressure's off now. No one got anything right. So it's I can say whatever the hell I want. Like,
epistemic humility has been restored. And last but certainly not least, we've got my podmate on Swampside Chats, the only person that you can't see live, the ever enigmatic Jake Verso from Tampa, Florida. How you doing?
Pretty good. Been nursing a low-grade hangover all day, but I'm finally coming out of it, I think.
Excellent. Just in time.
Yeah.
All right. Well, as things stand, let's see, is this going to give me a background? Nah, it's just going to shuffle us around. That's fine. As things stand, we are very, very, very excruciatingly close to a Biden victory. Last I checked, and feel free to correct me, all the votes in major swing state Pennsylvania had not been counted, and many of those were in the urban to suburban centers around Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. So we are still at a contingency point. Things hang in the balance. Since we're already starting from a place of epistemic humility and we're kind of at a potential tipping point, how do we feel things are going to shake out, and ballpark how long you think it's going to take?
For the votes to come in?
Yeah, how long is it going to take before the slow drip water torture is over?
That's what I'm thinking too.
Yeah, Friday we'll settle PA. And I mean, I have a hard time seeing Trump winning, even with like Maine and Nebraska like splitting electors, which will happen even though Biden's going to get the majority of electors out of Maine and Trump's going to get the majority out of Nebraska. It was a closer split than you think. Yeah, I'm not so much. I mean, one of the things about this election has been I'm not as much interested in the horse race of it. Is like how everybody's been wrong about the demography and pathways for this. You know,
oh, you mean Nate Silver got it wrong? Really? Who knew?
It's not just. I mean, it's not just Nate. To be fair, I mean, you know, I speak like I know him. Ben Burgess knows him, so I get the mock Ben for that. But
boy,
yeah. But it's interesting because the class breakdown and the racial breakdowns don't exactly fit the narrative we've been telling ourselves for the last 3 months. And I find that to be probably one of the things that makes this so hard to call is, you know, one of the reasons why I think Nate Silver was wrong, and then I'll turn it back over, but like there's all these adjusts that they do on these polls. That are based off of priors. And if you look at the way the voting patterns are going right now, the priors aren't any good. Like they're not going to help you. So, I mean, the Democrats underperformed amongst people of color and they overperformed amongst white suburban voters. And by the Democrats, I mean Biden. The Democrats in general underperformed all the way across. And that was despite the fact that even in Trump country, progressive ballot measures went through.
I mean, there were some. How many DSA endorsed candidates actually won their seats for the races they were in? It was like a pretty big number,
Something
20,
like 75%.
Yeah,
it was a pretty big number. So, and then we have a race here in California where there's a progressive running against a Democrat, and I know that was coming down to the wire. I think his name is David Kim in SoCal. I worked on did some work with Shahid Buttar. I don't know if you guys ever talked about him, who was running against Nancy Pelosi. That definitely, you know, I don't want to say broke my heart, but COVID really stopped the ground game that was swelling with that. And then couple that with the bullshit that he kind of got caught up in literally a week after he finally got the front page on the San Francisco Chronicle calling out Pelosi for not debating him. The 7 days later, he also makes the front page for the quote unquote scandal that he was a part of. So I think that was, I mean, for real progressives, for me, that was like heartbreaking. Because I'm like you guys when it comes to the presidential race. It's like, you know, it's Joe Biden. Like, word.
What do you make on the Prop 22 loss? Like
that?
What?
Oh, you know,
and
I've
the rent
done
control
that.
loss.
I've done Prop 22 was something I was really I was a big no guy on Prop 22 because I did those shitty jobs and worked in that tech sector in the Uber building. And to see how they had this really simple to follow narrative of if I change the label of your job is not what it is. And for people to follow it so easily. Right. Were y'all any of y'all following 22?
Yeah, I was.
Yeah, I was following 22 a little when I lived in California. I lived around the Bay Area for about 8 years. I was a Lyft driver and quit about the time when they started declaring their drivers, petty proprietors and requiring us to do LLC filings because we are, entrepreneurs, right? And not employees of a, big nightmare cybernetic, tech routing marketplace. So yeah, Prop 22. Someone give me like a rundown of Prop 22 for us non-Californians.
It was the proposition that so what happened was there was a bill that had passed in California actually trying to rein in some of this the way tech does labor, that said that they have to stop looking at these gig workers as contractors, and they were employees. So they were supposed to get paid sick leave, health care, a minimum wage, because there's so much idle time. So you're supposed to get paid for that idle time where you're like kind of waiting in between rides. And and social, they're going to pay into Social Security and unemployment. And Uber and Lyft were like, if you make us do this, we have to shut down. So they were fighting it in the courts, fighting it. And finally they came up with this bill that said, if it passes to defeat us, you got to get 7/8 in the state house to kill it. And we know y'all ain't going to get it. So we're going to lay this out here. And they dumped $180 million into ads that were just, they were making the drivers give you 20 yes on 22 shit when you got your food. Like,
ooh,
that's how real it had gotten. And there were so many drivers that were getting mad at me because I was like, why are you saying that you want this? You want yes on this? And they're like, well, if I vote no on this, I'll lose my status as a contractor. And I'm like, okay, well, what does that mean to you? And they're like, well, I'll be an employee. I was like, well, what does that mean to you? And they always reverted back to a job they had beforehand that sucked. And I would have to go, well, my girlfriend's an employee and she makes 6 figures. She's not tripping. You telling me you're making all this money, nothing's going to fundamentally change with the way the job works. And people really thought that if the bill didn't pass, that it was going to go to an environment where, there was going to be a manager and someone's going to yell at them. They have to come in at a certain time. Like, I was like, they don't have the infrastructure for that.
Man. Yeah. I mean, when you're driving like for a rideshare company, you don't know the workforce. You don't know the rest of the workforce. And if, I was reading a lot of labor history at the time and like, oh, this is a nightmare scenario. The bare act of association would potentially be something radical in itself, just to actually meet the other people in the workforce, because it depends so much on atomization. So to think of rideshare drivers, like in a lot of rideshare drivers being scared by management, autonomous or not, it's fucking management, into, voting against their interests and then promoting against their interests is pretty devastating to me. And to think that like, I don't know, just kind of funny. There are some people that were puzzled that Florida was a red state, but they also passed a minimum wage increase. How does that work? Well, California is a blue state, and then they passed Prop 22 at the same time,
and also undid rent controls, which I actually don't think rent controls is actually that progressive of a policy, believe it or not. But like in the standard progressive narrative, that's bad. So like it was. You know what though? You have that, and you have the social, like the intermediary social class in California is being decimated. Like they're leaving. Particularly now. That's probably not true in Oakland, right? But it's definitely true in the Bay and in LA and all that.
There was a bit of an exodus because also to keep in mind a lot of the tech jobs started opening up in Austin, and it's cheaper to live in Austin. But fucking, I've been to Texas several times. It's not San Francisco. It's fucking hot there. It's hot for no reason. It's humid for no reason. I don't understand humidity. This shit you see me in right now, I'm gonna wear this shit all year. The
Yeah.
same shit,
No.
right? And you move your monkey ass to Austin, it's gonna fuck you up. You're like, oh, shit got real. Yeah, take your ass back to San Jose.
Yeah, the Mediterranean climate type is a big impact on what makes the Bay Area what it is. And I too had to leave the Bay Area. And now I live in a desert-ass desert.
Disgusting.
I was gonna say, I don't know if you've ever looked into this, Derek, but it seems like California, there's always been that like mainstream narrative that it's like some progressive utopia, or if you're like a Tucker Carlson type, like a progressive dystopia, but it has like there's like a history of reactionary movements that come out of California that don't get covered much.
Urbana came out of California. A lot of the white nationalist stuff was out of California, actually. One of the things that I think people don't look at is
the Bay Area National Anarchists, right?
Yeah, like with Troy Southgate, who was this weirdo British National Party, moved to Cascadia, started building up weird anarchist groups in Oregon and in California. My ex-wife, family is from the valley outside of the Bay, which when you talk about, although it's being gentrified now, but you want to talk about like red areas, like it felt like it was almost a parody of like the South as far as like the positions I'd see people take. Like it was so much more extreme than what I grew up in Macon, which is a mostly black city.
I know where that is.
Yeah.
Are you talking about the Central Valley, Derek?
Yeah, I
Central
am.
Valley? Okay.
Yeah, I'm talking about, she her grandparents are from Ripon. She grew up around Modesto, and then her family moved out in the mining boom in the 80s to Nevada and then to Wyoming. But we would go back there and we'd go into the Bay first and go out to the Central Valley, and the Central Valley was cray. And there's stuff about California that I didn't understand. Like, do you know that they didn't meter water for and yeah, my southern accent just came out. They didn't meter water for till 5 years ago in rural California. Like even during the drought.
Let that shit come out. First of all, let that shit come out. Keep it real. Get country as fuck.
Here.
Yep, you grits eating motherfucker.
I am a grits eating motherfucker.
Second of all, yes, I did. Central California's got some. The LA Times. I subscribe to the Times because they actually do some really good work on real estate, homelessness, and the water crisis in Central California.
Now, Jason, I understand that you have a bit of a time box. You got a time limit here, you want to weigh in on your big takeaways from this election, and just how did we get here?
You want me to answer all that?
I mean, if you have limited time, it makes sense.
You know what? I'll tell you this. Can I say this?
I say this?
Miss Ezra, can I say this? I just want y'all to know that I called Joe Biden winning this shit a long time ago, and I wrote it down on Punk Ass Medium, and I said Trump wasn't going to win. And I was on a show last night with some the Left Flank Vets podcast, a bunch of leftist post 9/11 war vets. They were and Katz was getting all upset, and they're like, "How could Biden? What did he do? How?" I was like, "Look, chill out. Biden's finna win. Get ready for that." And the one thing I don't like about, I'll try to be brief, and I'm sure you guys have talked about this ad nauseum. Donald Trump is just, all he is pro wrestling. If you guys grew up watching WWF, Donald Trump is Ravishing Rick Rude. Donald Trump is Jake the Snake. That's all he is.
Well, you're insulting Jake the Snake and Rick Rude now. And this is insulting to pro wrestling.
Donald Trump
oh my God.
is Donald Trump when he appeared literally on what was at the time WWF.
Yeah.
Yeah. Didn't he get a stunner? Didn't he get a Stone Cold Stunner from?
Was it Stone Cold or was it a chair?
Okay, I'm not sure, but Working Class Hero Stone Cold Stunner.
He got a Stone Cold Stunner and he took it wrong too.
Yeah, he took it like a punk. Yeah.
He gave a stunner to a panda, and the World Wildlife Foundation They weren't up for that shit at all.
Oh,
That was the
I'm
X-rated
hella mad
version.
y'all
I don't know if
remember
anybody
that
else saw
shit when he was on Raw. I'm mad y'all remember. Because that was before he was running when he was on Raw.
Oh yeah, definitely.
yeah.
It-
Before the McMahon family was running. Same party.
Oh.
Linda McMahon is one of his top campaign contributors.
So are you basically saying that all of this is just Vince McMahon like this? Like Vince McMahon is the real dude behind it all. Like he's the wizard in this bitch. Like Vince McMahon is in this bitch. Like I got him.
That'd honestly be an improvement. Like,
At least
that
there
would
would
be
be
more-
some kind of rational narrative coordinating this, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
They were gonna put him on
Somehow-
they were gonna put him on the COVID recovery team,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
McMahon was gonna be on there.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
He did great shit with the XFL. Fuck what y'all say.
What with the
He's supposed to be bringing it back. I thought.
no safe
The Rock, I think, is.
people are like running all full speed at you and I know about the XFL.
Hey, the camera angles the NFL still uses to this day that they stole from him from the XFL.
That was an XFL innovation. The camera angles.
Yeah.
XFL. He
Worker
hates me.
safety, whatever. Oh
Worker
man. He hate
safety.
me. Yeah, I guess that was the beginning of like, all right, I'm gonna like change my name and put it on the jersey. You couldn't have Meta World Peace without he hate me. So
And the NBA with all that Black Lives Matter shit in the back of theirs, like, hey, racism's gone. There you go.
So one of the things I'm fascinated about this, the reason why I thought Biden was gonna win, although last night I did have a crisis of my predictions. About 11 o'clock, I was like, maybe we're in Red Mirage, maybe we're in Red Tide, maybe Putin will be president tomorrow, and like Rachel Maddow was right the entire time. I don't fucking know anymore. And but I woke up and I felt like, oh, Biden's going to win, but not the way anyone thought. And the corporate money was why I thought he was going to win. Like, because like it's clear to me that corporate powers is shifting where they're putting their energy.
They either went with Biden or they tended to sit out the election. Not everybody went Biden, but a lot of the big billionaires decided to only put their money into propositions, down ballot stuff, not Trump.
Well, think about some of the propositions and down ballot issues that were going on. Like 22, it makes sense why these humongous billionaires are putting $180 million into making sure this measure passes, because you're changing the way labor laws go, and it could set some serious precedent. I did contract work at Square, and how different is it going to look now if I ever try to go back there with this 22 passing? Because their minimum wage that they told people that they were going to get was $5.64 an hour. And part of the original bill to say no is like, look, man, we're going to give you the real minimum wage for the place that you're at. So if you're driving in San Francisco and it's $15 an hour, you get $15 an hour. And, you know, they were like, nah, you're going to get $5.64. Shut the fuck up. Take this $5.64. And that's what it is.
yeah. Like
It's interesting though
That's some
they
shit
didn't
you
focus on the red states. Like that is something that's fascinating to me. That they thought that the down ballot stuff was going to transfer to those propositions in like Florida and Colorado was equally weird. Actually, Colorado was like split on progressive versus regressive on down ballot stuff. Like they're publishing public employees, but there's a lot of good public policy that got passed down ballot. It's also hard to know, like with these when these ballot referendums go through and Republicans and these states rewrite them, they'll be weak tea, but they do generally have to do something. So it is interesting that like it seems to me that the corporate money is not quite as on spot as it normally is. Like they weren't as good as it. I don't want to talk about our bourgeois overlords as if they're great or anything, but they seem to be blindsided by all this stuff.
Well, did you guys ever cover Kashama Sawant when she was running last year in Seattle?
Oh, I didn't cover it, but I watched.
I was there. I was there the night she won. We were playing a show in Seattle, and it was kind of a interesting feeling in the town because you have this, was it $1.8 million? I think Amazon threw at a city council race, and then but you look how powerful that she's been in that city. She's been this really annoying thorn in big business's side, and in a perfect world. Sorry, somebody just rang the doorbell and. This ain't the neighborhood where people ring doorbells.
At like 8:45 p.m. Oh wait, no, it's 5:45 p.m. over there.
I'm gonna go. If I don't come back, then shit's all bad.
Leave your mic on, just in case.
Oh God. Well, I wanted to pivot to just looking at top donors for Biden and top donors for Trump, because I think that's a fun game. So open system preferences. Wow, I have to do a lot of bullshit right now. One moment, please, dears.
Let's do it. Let's do a prediction. Let's do a prediction. See if we can guess it.
Oh, Tom.
I have to recuse myself because I already looked this up.
Yeah. You already looked this up. I mean, it is it's interesting. It's maybe not as interesting as I would hope, but it's
Warren
something.
Buffett, Biden.
Let's
Silicon Valley, Biden.
Let's take a look. Top.
Not all of Silicon Valley went Biden.
What about the weird guy who owns the Intercept? Did he go Biden?
Probably.
Probably, yeah.
Who knows what that guy's doing? All right, I gotta follow some steps to get permissions. This is amateur hour. Fuck a screen capture right now. But no. Let's get more predictions. Let's get more.
You're talking about donors for who donated to who?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so for Biden, I got Les Wexner, Bill Gates, Kevin Spacey. Let's see who else.
I think Jake might be pulling a Q leg, if you know what I'm saying. He's
Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jeffrey Epstein from his through a series of bank accounts connected to his main account in Israel, where he's
if dead men can get elected, they can donate.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I mean, they have a right to. So let's see. According to Investopedia, the biggest industries represented among Biden donors this cycle are overall securities and investment, lawyers, law firms, and education. And let's see. Top for Biden was Donald Sussman of Paloma Partners, 9 million. James Simons of Euclidean Capital, which is a real thing. I wonder if there's non-Euclidean capital. That's 7 million. Deborah Simon retired, 4.6 million. Looks like her father was a mall tycoon, and they do philanthropy, which is a job. And let's see, George Marcus, who's a billionaire real estate manager, $4 million. So yeah,
what's a real estate?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, big capital.
What, being a mall guy?
Jeffrey Skull.
That's fucked up.
Yeah. I mean, life must not be good without a little vaporwave here and there to make sweeten the deal with nostalgia. Number 10 is Jeffrey Skull, who's the first president of eBay. So let's see. That's Biden.
It really is the 18th premier of Joe Biden, isn't it?
Well, yeah, because finance capital seems to be getting behind him for once. And it was weird because at first, the markets responded well to Trump, and now maybe not so much. But we do see finance and real estate also represented in Trump's top donors, but also oil and gas.
So to say the industry and the weirdly, I had a friend argue with me who was quoting Amy Therese, and I know we're not supposed to mention that name, but I had a friend argue with me about this, and they had a point that the imperialism of the energy sector is going to drop off for a while because of fracking. Oh, we lost Jason. Over now, Jason. Thank you for coming on.
Au revoir.
that the energy section has lost its imperialism to some degree because of fracking and because they would love to do business with all these countries that there are geopolitical tensions with. And so that doesn't surprise me. That said, it is also interesting that like finance capital did not complete this narrative that like Trump is, somehow bucking finance capital through backing up, real estate and energy just doesn't seem to be totally backed by the backers who are still backing him either. So like he still has some finance and all that behind him too. I mean, but those motherfuckers hedge their bets also. So like,
yes, hedge their bets. A term from finance capital.
I was gonna say,
anybody hear about the English guy who put on a bet on Trump yesterday for $5 million
No,
at 2.78, I think.
Wow.
Fucking hell. That was a brave bet.
some people just vote with their buttholes. It's not about opinion polls. That's how it is,
No, the odds for
That's why
Trump
it's
though
such a
were
dirty
good. Like
game.
I considered like putting money on Trump because like the return would have been so good. If I put like a couple $100 down, like I could have made serious money.
Yeah.
I was gonna say,
Right.
my favorite article that I read yesterday about the election was it was from a defense industry website. It was saying, how does the defense industry feel about the election? And it just said everyone else is worried, but the defense industry doesn't really care. Either way, they're going to give the support of both parties. Bipartisan support for the defense industry. It's inevitable.
Support of troops. By support of troops, I mean support Boeing.
Yeah.
Right.
Boeing, our troops.
See, some things don't actually change.
Right.
Yeah. So let's see. Top donors for Trump. Number 1, Timothy Mellon, Pan Am Systems. He owns the largest regional railroad in the U.S. 10 million bucks. He is usually absent from politics, and Republican operatives reportedly had to look up his name on Google when he came forward to help. Number 1 donor. So Kelsey Warren of Energy Transfers, the CEO, the Texas-based company owns and operates the controversial Dakota Access Pipeline. So that's 10 million bucks, which Investopedia thinks Democratic candidate Joe Biden may slow down or may shut down or slow the review the process of that pipeline. Oh, Investopedia, you've got another thing coming. Jeffrey Palmer is 6 million. I guess he's owns buildings in LA. Number 4, baby, Linda McMahon. Let me get a hell yeah from the audience. She ran the Small Business Administration. Yeah, real marks. From 2017 through 2019, and that's Mark the wrestling term, not the man Karl Heinrich Marx. She's a chair of some PAC. Number 5, none of them are going to be as fun as Linda McMahon, of course, but casino owner, financial services, ABC Supply, the largest wholesale distributor of roofing products in the country. And someone that was on the economics advisory team who started the shopping giant Uline. And number 6, the top Scientology donor, 3 million, Patricia Duggan. That's good. That is kind of good stuff.
Dugan.
Well, there's 2 G's, but you're right. It's probably that.
I told you.
Linda
I had a
McMahon
dream that Richard Maddow was right.
Yeah. So Linda McMahon and Patricia Dugan are both part of America First Action Super PAC. So there you go.
So the thing is, these are the people who did the top contributions, but they're not the richest people in America. If you look at the richest people in America, is what I was talking about, where they either sat it out, did down ballot stuff, or they went for Biden. Not as big as any of these people, but they did. That's where they put their money.
Yeah, not only that, but like the employees of most of the big companies gave. Yeah, I have a chart here. The 100 employers are the most employees who donated to each campaign, and it's literally every single one of. So 97 of them are gray to blue, and 3 of them, the U.S. military, the U.S. Marines, and the NYPD, who are among the bottom 3 donors in general. Everything else was either gray. So notably, U.S. Postal Service, Allied, Publix, Duke Energy, Walmart, U.S. Army, Lowe's, L3 Harris, Securitas, FedEx, Remax, U.S. Air Force, McDonald's, FCA. They're all gray, but everything else is blue, some shade of blue. So the employees of the top 100 employers are, very pro-Biden. So
what is the USPS doing? What did they do in voted gray?
They're trying the abolition of the state from the very roots of the state. All right,
That's some Galaxy Brain Lennon shit.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they're heightening the contradictions. We'll destroy our own company.
So we're seeing here that all of the companies essentially were neutral to blue, and Joe Biden still only won by a couple of fucking million votes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
Democrats blew fucking, even though they had success on the very down ballot progressive initiatives, they blew most of their races. The House is they lost seats, although they did keep it. Admittedly, now what's funny about this, Tom, you're gonna get amused about this. The centrist Democrats want to get rid of Pelosi because they screwed up to weaken the left because Biden did okay. He gained with white men and middle class voters, and also if you look at the Democrat, like the spread of Democratic support, you have strong support amongst the poor and lower middle classes. So basically the proletariat, right? And then you had almost split 50-50 amongst the uber rich. Only the section of between about $99,000 to $200,000 a year in income went for Trump cleanly. So like the PB thesis is totally PMC. It's totally confirmed. The PMC went blue probably. I mean, in so much there is a PMC, but the professional managerial strata went blue. The petty bourgeois went red. The lower middle classes went red. Although I was pointing out with the racial stuff, we're seeing differences in racial trends that no one predicted. So, and it's mostly towards Trump, but not all of it. For example, Maricopa County and a lot of the Latino community in Arizona, which normally votes Republican, went blue. However, a lot of the Latino community in the East Coast, mostly in Florida, but not just in Florida, went red. Like, and if you look at the numbers, you saw increases of voters in every category.
Well, that's just because Joe Biden is a radical socialist.
Well, some of the answer to some of this is located. Okay, people were asking. Florida goes Trump, but passes a $15 minimum wage. Well, a $15 minimum wage doesn't support abortion or not support abortion. A $15 minimum wage isn't gonna implement Sharia law. It's a thing that is an initiative in and of itself that can't really be dragged into any like this culture war horse shit. So, you're probably gonna see like some weird polarization. Even within different class strata, because nobody's really offering them anything.
It's just kind of at the presidential level, this was kind of an election about nothing other than the candidates, right? I couldn't get a clear message from anyone about.
No, the whole Biden pitch was, this is a battle for the soul of America and about respect and decency.
Metaphysics!
Yeah,
I'm not Trump was the campaign.
Yeah.
It's a culture. It was a culture campaign, culture war.
Almost lost, and he's still almost lost. And I knew Biden was going to win because I read Real Clear Politics opinion polls and paid attention to Nate Silver, of course. So nothing learned here, but I don't think very many people expected just how close this would be. And we're talking about it like it's a done deal. And the thing that really gets it for me is the way the votes are likely to shake out in Pennsylvania. But it's so fucking close. Even when Trump essentially mishandled a pandemic and the country decided to drive itself in an economic crisis because it didn't really know what else to do, because there's no real leadership about it, and denial, can't forget denial, and we didn't have the infrastructure, and we had just-in-time production so that we didn't have the supply lines buttered for COVID. So there's so many like failures of leadership and disastrous things that I feel like if you ran almost anyone against Trump, and I could be wrong, I haven't consulted, generic name brand, store brand Democrat, poll ratings on this, but I think Bernie could have handled this easily. Could name brand or could store brand Democrat have handled this easily? Is there something about Biden that's a particularly weak candidate? I mean, yes, but is Biden store brand Democrat?
Yes, I think Biden's store brand Democrat because the Democrats did poorly across the board except for the DSA candidates. And even there, I'm going to be honest, they're only in progressive strongholds. They only really tried in progressive strongholds. So we didn't see any major shifts there. But the lesson that they're going to learn from the demographic shift is, we don't really have a hold on the communities of color, but we gain some people in the suburban white community, which is now 50-50 as opposed to split, even though the Lincoln Project must have burned up a couple of $1 billion in money for nothing.
What didn't it go up this time? The amount of Republicans that voted for Trump, it went from 90% to 93%.
The amount of people, the amount of Republicans that voted for Trump went up. The amount of people that voted for. So here's another thing that this election shatters that people aren't really talking about yet.
That's painful. That's so painful.
And here's another thing that people aren't talking about yet. It was always assumed that increased election participation would cut heavily towards the Democrats. It didn't. It did not.
That was surprising to me.
But I'll say this: the thing is, bottom line is this: pretty much everybody wins here, but us, or at least everybody in power. Because the Democrats look like they're basically going to, there's a gridlocked government, and Wall Street's already celebrating because now for sure there won't be any reforms. And the Democrats now have the perfect alibi. It's not like it's an Obama or early Clinton administration situation where it's a clean sweep and now they have to do something and explain why they can't, right? They don't have to do that. The Republicans don't have to hold the bag on COVID and whatever insane financial fallout is coming. And the liberals who never gave a shit anyway can go back to brunch because they got Biden in the White House.
Totally. I said to someone today, I said the big winner of this election is that if you're a libertarian, you must be coming your pants right now because this gridlock is going to make any kind of governance completely impossible. So,
I also think I predicted today that we're entering a period like we entered in the 70s where we had a bunch of one-term presidents for a while. And the late 60s, late 60s, 70s was like that. And it's because
but Derek, they weren't all fucking 80 years old.
That's true, but people died at 65 back then, like a decent person.
Derek, I wanted to mention something before I forget. A lot of people have been saying, well, this election proves that you can't trust, the polling data. So you mentioned the whole, Trump losing support amongst white males and gaining support with every other demographic. Do we have any confirmation of that, though, outside of the Edison Research exit polls?
We only have the exit polls by the Edison Research and the New York Times that they are consistent. The thing is, no one can do research on the mail-in ballots. No one can do that. There's no way to do it. So, we have a secret ballot in this country. So there's going to be
everything's weird right now because of the COVID situation. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, but that could be self-selecting essentially for people who are fucking going to the polls, in person. It could radically skew the type of people that's coming through.
I think so, but
I tell you, like, how like both the Republicans and the Democrats have lost. I know, like, you're right, they've won, but like the view from the only, well, I don't know, Kyle is Canada. Let's be honest, it's America. So like from the sorry, only joking.
Tom, how dare you?
I'm joking. We're all
America
thinking it.
Junior.
You don't say it. I say it. I'm like Donald Trump. I say it. Everybody's thinking it. No one says it. Okay, no. Everybody does.
Yeah.
No.
We all just look up at Canada and be like, you're just like us. You're exactly the same. Our differences are invisible. I don't see country.
That's it. But like over here, like I was just doing a road trip picking up these fucking wardrobes today with my mate, and like he actually lived in America for about 10 years. He was illegal, and he was just like going, it's mad, isn't it? He was just like going, fucking Americans. He's like, the stupidest bastards of all time. It's like how they voted back. They look like they nearly voted Trump back in. Like when European people are looking, not in a kind of a snobby fucking way, but just like people are kind of shocked. They're like with all the rubbish that Trump has done, he still's nearly getting back in. And like people like could, like, I think internationally people could like they could kind of excuse just somebody just voting Trump in once just to throw the cat amongst the pigeons, but like to put him back in, you would, after all the bleach, fucking let's inject bleach and all this kind of stuff that everybody over here knows, it kind of makes America look fucking mad. I don't mean that. I'm not even.
I just want to remind you that Boris Johnson's still your PM. So
not my PM. Not my PM.
I mean, think about like England and Ireland are basically the same. I mean,
First of all, how dare you? Second of all, yeah.
No, but all of Boris's fucking madness.
Okay, so there's that.
No, but I mean, or the point I'm trying to get is not like slag Americans off. I just mean like, I do like doing that though, I must say. No, it's like it's to talk about like the geopolitical standing, like America's standing over here has gone through the floor, and that has real geopolitical power implications.
I want to add on to that. My thought is, like, at what point does America become so divided and morale so low that everyone else starts smelling blood?
I think it's there. I just think it's a matter of the first person to act. I think it's there. I really genuinely do. Like, people are looking over there. Like, say for example, if something geopolitical happened and America wanted to go to war, I don't think the American state could go to do a major war now.
No, I agree with you actually on that, Tom.
Yeah, and I don't think they'll be able to do it for 10 years. Maybe in 10 years things will have washed out and some kind of new formation will have come together. But for 10 years, I don't think they'll be able to do it.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing about I want to push back on this a little bit from the international perspective. I've been hearing this for 10, 15 years. And it's both true that our status is declining. We're definitely in the Hadrian's Wall period of empire. But remember how fucking long that can last. Like, I don't expect it to last like the Roman Empire, but that retreat period can last longer than the ascension period did. And that was true with the British too. So like what we have right now is basically a failing hegemon with nothing clear to replace it. Like, China's not ready. Europe, fuck off. You guys barely matter anymore. Like,
you can't get shit together. You can't even decide.
Derek, that's not true about the British. The British went from like 19 what? Probably the Irish Rebellion was the first one they lost, 1919, and by 1945 they'd lost the empire. Okay, like that was 25 years.
But you had lost. Britain had lost its maximum production capacity and its economic hegemony as early as 1870. Like,
But
which
sure,
is which
America's lost its hegemony to China in industrial production
right.
probably at this
We're
stage
actually
already.
we are at the 1870 point. Actually, like if you look at the historical analysis, and things are going faster. Like,
yeah, they have
but
to.
I would kind of venture towards Tom's, you know, projecting that things are going to be more accelerated in a capitalist empire's decline. However, this conversation is a sort of, you know, international echo of a similar conversation that we often have inside the country of, God, these parties are so moribund. When are they going to die? And some other party is going to replace it. Now, we keep having situations where a party looks like a total fucking shit show joke, and no matter how, you know, debased and dumb it looks, somehow it endures because it's so hard in this like complex system to create something new, and it's so hard to scrape off the old.
right. I mean, the
How
Well,
much?
Well,
How
there's
long,
a few,
how
there's
long
a
will
few
that
things.
take us? How long will that take the parties internally?
Well, there's a
I don't
there's-
think the parties are demoralized, though. That's the thing.
well, first of all-
America is demoralized.
First of all,
Yeah.
they're almost not even parties. At least the Democrats. I've said this a million times. My Democrats don't really care about winning thing because they're basically a collection of, you know, basically different entrepreneurs, political entrepreneurs who go to the call center in DC and make calls to rich people all day. And if somebody in the party loses, you haven't lost the cause. Your coworker who you stand around the water cooler and talk about, I don't know, Grey's Anatomy with between phone banking sessions, he's not going to be there next year. Too bad, right? That's not a loss for some kind of collective project. Okay, that's the first
I
thing.
thought you were going to say
It's a
West
loss
Wing.
for a brand. It's a loss for. Why doesn't this make the party invincible if it's not a real organization and it's just a floating signifier brand? Why
Because
does doesn't that mean that it can never die because it's beyond corporate being?
Here's the thing. First of all, the thing that makes it different from like a previous era
Viable system.
is you have much stronger federal government and like national security state, like with like an autonomous sector that's like actively like designed to enforce the political order of the United States. You also have a situation where you kind of have like this like civic society in the United States has been pretty effectively hollowed out. And yeah, so the Democratic Party basically like squats in this position, and there really aren't a whole lot of authentic political leaders because, one of the things that was exciting about Bernie Sanders, which I want to talk a little bit more about in a minute, but one of the things that was exciting about Bernie Sanders is that he did potentially have an opportunity to lead a dirty break with the Democrats. But really, to fully accomplish something like that, you'd probably need like 5 or 6 Bernies.
Yeah,
You would need five or six guys who were capable of leading a number of factions that could coalesce into something new. And that the people who could be said to be political leaders on the left either aren't really in any kind of office or any meaningful position of power, and they're all too cucked by the Democrats to even countenance something like that in any serious way.
agreed. I mean, there's a couple of things I want to bring up about the Democrats, though, because this is unique to them in their history. They have never been a coherent party. They're the longest existing party on the fucking planet. All right? They literally are the first voter-based party on Earth. and they have survived by being coalitions that believe in nothing. And when I say that, people are sometimes shocked, but I'm like, this was a party that in the 1930s had Stalinist, Dixiecrats, progressive labor organizers, the remains of the Populist Party, and the remains of the SPA that went liberal and not into the CPUSA, all in the same fucking party, and kept it together with a progressive segregationist passing it over to a business magnate who then gave in to a member of an order of bourgeoisie that doesn't even really exist in America anymore, and gave it and like completely changed, and like made concessions to the labor movement, which built that coalition. But like, that's an insane coalition. And that's their history. That's their history going back to fucking Jefferson. Like they've always, like, they were a coalition of yeoman farmers and weirdos, and that's their history. And that
they're still full of weirdos.
Yeah, they are still full of weirdos. But like,
no, I have a question for you, Derek. Derek.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry for interrupting the flow. A question for you. It's like, what percentage of like under 30s consider themselves either Republican or Democrat?
I'm actually sure it's pretty low.
Because the general populace is below 50% now, isn't it? It's a majority independence.
Yeah,
I would think like people coming through like under 20s, under 25s, it's got to be like fucking like 20% or 30% consider themselves Democrat or Republican now.
I would say what we see now is the pollsters keep on saying the independents are actually, you should treat them as adjacent to one party or another, and I guess in some ways it's true, but I think you see more clear identification with the Republicans actually than you do, even though that's hyper declining, than you do with the Democrats. I don't know any young Democrats who aren't like, and a lot of the young Democrats I know are also like claim to be Marxist and shit. It's weird.
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of this pervasive problem where it's very difficult for people to conceptualize something outside of the two-party band that exists. Probably because most people, when it comes to politics, they don't really think about it all that much, which is how it works. The more you think about it, the more it seems strange, and that's what made me think is like, what is it that made this last two cycle of elections particularly fascinating to people like us? Well, part of it was Trump, but I think a big part of it was also the coexistence of Bernie Sanders, because what Bernie Sanders did was introduce into this very heavily kind of regulated space a genuine antagonism, which is something that Trump didn't. But Bernie introduces genuine antagonism that allowed him to, within the discourse of itself surrounding presidential electoral politics, expose the contradictions and just base corruption and detachment from the material interests of everyday people that the thing produces. And like the last person who came close to doing something like this at this level was Ralph Nader. But Ralph Nader, he basically didn't do it within the prescribed space. He tried to run as the Green Party. And because that was something that people didn't conceptualize as a thing that you could even do, they were able to, basically effectively say, well, he's doing this because he wants to like hurt the Democrats or something, or because he's a narcissist or whatever, right? By approaching it, by trying to like expose the system that way, he wasn't really able to do it. Bernie Sanders basically had to go like inside that space and do it from the inside out. But that was also the limitations of it at the same time.
Limitation because he could have pivoted and didn't. Like he could have pivoted towards the attack once he had played nice and gotten to the pulpit, but didn't. I think the sort of
he was never going to do that. Bernie was he was never going to.
The long term of Bernie Sanders' like organizational trajectory from like Vermont in the 70s and flipping a one party like Republican one party state to becoming a progressive stronghold. At first, he was a totally independent campaign. He pissed off the Democrats by running independent in his like early history. But once he got in, the kind of party apparatus or the proto-party apparatus that he built up around him, got subsumed to the Democrats rather quickly. If there was a time that he was going to build like a stable of Bernies, that could have been, a cadre moment perhaps. But Bernie's never been that guy. Like he's capable of bringing an independent, fierce, and I think quite sincere energy only so far.
Mm-hmm.
Not to be too structuralist about it. The only reason that he ever got that far is because he's precisely the type of person who cannot say no to the father, you know, like.
Right.
But there's an element of that, he was a plausible face for the Democratic Party because he wasn't going to Trump them. And I do think you're downplaying the genuine antagonism that Trump has with the GOP establishment, that Bernie could have tantalizingly. And then he said, nope, I'm going to be very respectable and lose like a good man. Like,
well, here's the thing: is though Trump's antagonism of the GOP establishment is hyper selective. Like if you look at his original policy proposals, you know, he did have them, believe it or not, and he's reversed course on a lot of the more superficial, a lot of the more really different ones, the more populist ones.
Like reshoring and
yeah, well, I mean, he's tried to reshore, but his way of doing it, I mean, also it's not possible. But anyway, I mean, you know, MMP pipe dreams abound, but quantitative easing's been really good for the stock market, and that's about it.
He did try protectionism. He did try reshoring, and it did not go well.
It really blew up in his face. Yeah.
Well, he just slapped tariffs on shit. Like that's just gonna do it automatically.
So I did want to say one last thing about the international dimension here. It's very difficult to imagine, you know, something outside of the Republican Democrat universe. It's not very difficult to imagine something like a Turkish regional hegemony. It's not very difficult to imagine something like an expansion, not necessarily a hegemony, but of Chinese power in the Pacific, or, you know, a Chinese annexation of Taiwan is not inconceivable after we saw them crush Hong Kong. Like this stuff it's not the same problem that you have in America with trying to break out of that duality. There is organized forces that are weak, that are not strong enough to be a hegemon, but that could exert regional power in the context of American decline and go for blood.
Well, here's the thing. I don't think they're going to go for blood with America, though. Like, I think they're going to go for blood with each other.
Yeah, but exactly. Because, you know, the hegemon's weak. Let's go for it.
I mean, so we should start a Xiist party in America. I like where you're going with this.
Well, I mean, we already have one, right? But no, I mean, like in all seriousness, when I think about it, like you look at the tensions bubbling up between India and China, and I keep on saying, like, really pay attention to that because it proves that we are not the center of the universe solely anymore. However, if the dollar fails, like, everybody's fucked. I mean, that's what people don't see. Even with the Xi stuff, I'm like, there's a limit to how anti-imperialist they're going to get with the U.S. because we do have a mutually assured destruction pact economically. Like, that isn't gone away even under Trump. And now China holds more of the cards actually than we do. But in both cases, there's a real limit. Like someone brought up to me, like, why doesn't China cut off all the pharmaceutical supplies to the U.S.? And I'm like, because that would sabotage their own economy irreversibly. They're not stupid. Like, and the other thing about, like, this, everyone's talking about how Biden's going to have a bunch of wars. I mean, both on the left and the right. And I'm like, India and China aren't going to let that happen very easily. We're not in the time, like, after Gaddafi, it became clear to Putin that letting the U.S. dictate foreign policy and just being neutral on it was not going to vie. And he learned very clearly, regardless of what you think about Putin, that there's a limit to what the U.S. is willing to get involved with unless it affects directly Europe and our trade partners there. Like there is a real limit. One of the things that was floated out, I know this from that supposedly, I've heard this from two different sources, that when Putin realized there was going to be problems in Ukraine, that he actually tried to reach out to Poland to kind of divide that up so that the situation that we have now didn't happen. And yeah, it would have pissed a lot of people off, but it would have probably, you wouldn't have like two reactionary sides claiming anti-imperialists, both calling each other fascists with some legitimacy, like going on, if that had happened. And yet it seems like it didn't, partly because the the US and NATO didn't really want it to. So that kind of stuff is over. I mean, I really do think that. That's what. However, I also do think there's a limit to this Chinese rising power that is very real.
It's not just China, right? It's a whole bunch of regional powers that are going to be looking for opportunities.
Yeah.
It's not just China. It's not a China-centric world that we're moving to right away.
No, I mean we're in the post-American world that really Alexander Dugin and Fareed Zakaria both agreed was coming.
The multipolar world, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's multipolar with one giant, big, decaying stick in the middle of it. But like, because I see us being a riding hegemon for a while, and I actually think for the people of the United States, it would actually be better if we weren't. This is where I'm a little different than a lot of the more Maoist-y people. But I actually think we're at a point in empire where it no longer benefits the vast majority of the empire to be in it anymore. Maybe I'm optimistic on that, but like that seems like the reason why we're losing faith in like wars and stuff is everybody knows no war is going to bring us back to like, the George Kennan, we own 50% of the world's wealth at the end of World War II. And like,
Right.
Like that ain't happening again.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. How much of the echoes of, the Bush administration and the Iraq war and the broader war on terror do you think bring us to the moment we're at now? I mean, if anyone has comment on that, I think that's an unexamined thing.
It's a huge thing. Like they can't just pretend like that didn't happen.
I think that this is driving some of the trends in party identification, because we asked about, what are the trends in party identification, and it's pretty amazing. If you look at like the silent generation, from 28 to 45, from 1994, to roughly the present, they stay more or less the same. Like there are less independents. There's slightly more independents and less Republicans than there are by the end, by when it approaches the current time. Then with boomers, it's like almost exactly the same, except that more independents become Democrats. Very, very similar, like little, I don't know, like 4.3 point changes here or there. With Gen Xers, you do see it starts out with, mostly independents, or about a third independents, just over a third. By now, it's just over a third, with there being more Democrats than Republicans. With millennials, very interesting. So as of the 2008 election, we have 27% of millennials that identify as Republicans, 33% of millennials that identify as Democrats, and 33% of millennials that identify as independents. So, this is after the Iraq War. I think the Iraq War is a big sort of qualitative milestone for why, Republican identification took a hit. But then by the end, when you approach the current time, and Obama comes and goes, because where the paths cross is in the 2010 election. By the time you get to now, or to 1819, so yeah, you have less Republicans, 23%. But now you have 31% identifying as Democrats, and you have 42% of millennials that identify as independents. And that appears, across all of the data here, no one is at least identifying as independent as millennials. Now, on the other side of the chart, it shows you the silent generation and the boomers and the Gen Xers, and you just see like crisscrossing lines for, about 46, 45, 49, 48, just little this and that about who leans, because they have the one where they take independence seriously, and then they have the one that's like, no, but really, like, really pick red, pick blue. And for silent majority, for boomers, for Gen Xers, like, it's pretty close. Like, we're talking about like at most a, you know, a 5-point margin. For millennials, actually, it's pretty fun. Millennials, you know, in 2008, you know, you have 37% that lean Republican, and until now, which 38% lean Republican. In 2008, you had, or I suppose, yeah, 2008, you had, I said 2006. Doesn't matter. I can't read this graph. So, like, in 2008, you had 52% of millennials that identified as Democrats, or I'm sorry, leaning towards Democrats. Then you had 54% of millennials leaning towards Democrats. So, in a weird way, if you like round to the parties, the Democrats get like 15-point lead. If you don't round, we have a record number of people identifying with, you know, neither of the parties.
Right.
And it is very much generational. It is very much generational. That seems to be, yeah, you know, as much as people will sometimes talk about generational conflict, sort of underrepresented in the way people think about this.
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's, you know, the qualitative experience of living through the Iraq War and the Bush administration, then also living through hope, change, leading to fucking jack shit. That kind of puts a nausea in the stomach of all the millennials here.
Well, this really plugs into to the dying empire because, you know, there's a real change when you go from like the 90s when millennials were children, when I was a child, and the economic kind of boom of that time. And then you have 9/11, and then you have Bush, and then you have Iraq War. And I think after that, like if I'm going to point to any kind of like set of events or time period where the American hegemon starts to like first show its cracks, that's where I would start. Although through Bush and then Obama is when it starts to get more and more apparent, as culminating in Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's, I don't know. It's interesting. Not Tom went night. Good night, Tom. So night, Tom. But I'm sure Tom would agree that, you know, there are hegemons, you know, waiting for blood. Like, I think one way of reading the Ukraine situation with Russia is a sort of lunge and seeing, you know, what the fuck are you going to do about it? Kind of deal. You know, without knowing enough about the internals, like that does seem like the kind of flex that would have been met with an American, something beyond a strongly worded letter in a previous version of the American hegemon. But
yeah, I mean, there's a whole thing too where like because of nuclear weapons, like it's a Cold War problem. Like you can't have like any serious conflict due to that, but also because of the economic reasons that we mentioned earlier, we're not going to see any kind of direct challenge, just lunges for power that people have been bringing up so far.
So what I think is so fascinating about this time period in the States, we need to, like, not just the international question, but one of the things I think that people abroad don't really get about the States, maybe the Canadians do because they're basically us anyway.
It's the same. We're all the same.
But is that there's a core periphery issue in the U.S. itself, like it is driving a lot of the resentment. The reason why you can talk about liberal elites in New York and California, and have some purchase both on the right and the left, is like there is a sense where that is sucking, like right now, literally sucking up all the capital in the goddamn planet into these like micro enclaves. And I was thinking about how imperialism, this was true in the UK too, like it turns from vampiring off of, you know, anything it can touch outside of itself to like vampiring off itself. Like in the UK in like the 1920s and teens. So what do you guys make of like that analysis, particularly when you look at that, like, and you can combine it with like looking at the exit polls and stuff on who supports Trump and the income ratios? Like that is really, it does look like it is the PB and like rural management and stuff that is the core of the Republican Party right now, even more than the racial core. Like one of the interesting things I think people keep on not looking at is like there is kind of a moderately successful petit bourgeois of color that's been emerging the last decade. You know, it started pre-Trump, and that's good. I keep on telling people when they project like Democratic victories forever based off racial demographics, that like that's gonna stop as people, you know, as
people are really not.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say people are really not paying attention to that whole like. I think there's this idea that some Democrats have that like, oh well, Black America will always vote for us, and it's never going to change. And I'm like, I'm not sure that it's that simple. There's already these fractures happening. Very few people are talking about it on the left, but there's this whole fight in, Black political spaces now over this thing called ADOS, or African Descendants of Slaves. That's where the whole the thing with Ice Cube talking to Trump, They were involved with that whole thing. And their whole basic thing is like, we don't like Kamala Harris. We don't like these, Black politicians that are not African descendants of slaves. And they want reparations only for African descendants. And there are these like fractures between like people from different classes and strata within the Black community. And it's interesting to see those sort of frictions starting to bubble to the surface.
There's also like Latino anti-Blackness and inner Latino squabbles, and I mean, one of the
I'm amazed at how everyone is so surprised by the Cuban American thing, in Florida. Yeah.
You know what people didn't catch that was the Venezuelan American thing, because there's been a lot of that, and I also think people have underestimated like not just cultural attitudes, but the fact that like immigrants tend to open businesses like that they often have a hard time getting employment elsewhere actually. So opening up businesses is a common path. So, and their profit margins are extremely low. So a lot of the same calculus that you see with the rural PB who are right apply to some of them. It's not
a lot of the issues you get with liberals is that they tend to treat these people of color, these different demographics as being like homogenous. And they don't really, besides like some fringe discourse you get on Twitter and Facebook, you don't really have the acknowledgement of like Latino anti-Blackness, or there's a very real resentment that Indigenous, like Native Americans, have against Black people, because on a lot of the same metrics, they do just as bad or worse than Black people, right? But a lot of attention will go towards, a lot of immediate attention will go towards Black people in their minds, right? And whether or not how accurate that is, it's debatable. There's, I would say, a little bit of truth to it, right? But sans Dakota Access Pipeline and some of the conflicts in Canada,
you don't really hear a lot about Native Americans at all.
Right.
There's some people who don't even think Native Americans exist.
Yeah, I knew quite a few people living on the East Coast. Quite a few people that think they're all gone.
Right, and so I remember talking to somebody who was watching our stream, who was like who was indigenous trans woman, who was very resentful at Black Lives Matter in particular, and she cited an interaction with one of the Black Lives leader.
Like of an organization,
right, of like an organized group,
the hashtag organization pipeline.
So one of the interesting things about the Indigenous, if you look at the exit polls, while they are still slightly more Democratic, they voted Trump more than any other minority group, even more than Latino.
Very Republican, actually, and like white people can't talk about that. Like they don't. I mean, first of all, they don't know that, but second of all, if you tell them that, it's just going to melt a lot of their brains. White liberals in particular. Right, and then of course, right, conservatives will just trot them out as tokens. But
it's even when you look at Black voters in 2016, I think like black female voters tended to support Hillary, but I think overall black male voters, it was like historically low. I could be misinterpreting that, but
I think it was actually the prior election cycle was historically high, and we had like if you look at if you look at elections in the 90s, for example, election participation had been trending down. It also trended down a little bit in 2016, but like the election trends during the 80s and 90s was like you would have thought like only 30% of the population was eventually going to vote by now, and that all reversed. And then there was a blip in 2012. Though what was interesting is the black male vote went like Trump won more, I think, a more percentage of not just Latinos but of all people of color than Romney did in 2012. That sort of makes sense, if you think about the representation issue. But I went up and ran up a book and grabbed a book, an old book, a very old book that I thought was talked about this. I read this many years ago, and I'm writing a book on Christopher Lasch, blah blah blah. And Christopher Lasch references this book all the time, so I've been reading it.
What's the book?
It's called The Crisis of the Negro Intellectual, and it is all about people ignoring class issues and black nationalism and in their advocacy in the parties. It is before the Gary conference. If you guys know about the Gary conference, it's before that conference. But like, it's all about. It goes like from the Hammer and Hoe period, for those who know your like famous left literature, up to the 50s. And he's just called, this has been a constant problem in people trying to analyze black culture, is they don't see it as class.
You know what? It's really sad too, because it's a really fascinating history. I am familiar with that book, but when you look at like there is like a black bourgeoisie, and there's like people talk about fraternal organizations for like white elites. It's the same thing for black elites, things like the Blaze Society. But no one really looks at that history and how there's like a lot of class conflict within it. And it's really fascinating. But go on, Derek. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that was just what I was just going to make the same point. And I think we need to talk to more indigenous who would talk to us not on like white people liberal terms and get a better sense of what's going on. A lot of times indigenous issues cut left in the popular culture, but not so much on the res. And I don't feel, it's not just that I don't feel comfortable talking about it because I'm white, but I don't feel comfortable talking about it because I really don't understand it. When I talk yeah, go ahead.
I could speak a little bit to that. Like, I'm mixed. And I've been in the res and stayed with family for summers and stuff, and it's kind of, there's a similar dynamic that you get with the general kind of core periphery of like liberal elites and the big coastal like capital centers and the kind of more rural. But if you want it like real rural, not just like truck stops and like fast food joints, but like actual, like, to paint a picture, like when I was visiting my great aunt, there across the street from us was a couple. This is some very dark humor, so content warning or whatever. But they would call a couple who lived there, and it's like Shack, Romeo and Juliet, and they would joke about how they're like going into their mansion, and they have like a limousine, which is just like this broken down car in front of their house. Like, it's that kind of stuff. And like McDonald's was like one of the bigger like businesses out there, right? And this is where like the government offices are. This is like an actual town, and it's like very, very rural. A lot of people on the Navajo Nation are still like herding sheep. And so, there's this kind of, there's a lot of Catholicism, and there's this a little bit of like a cultural conservatism, but it's not the same kind of way you think about it with white people, right? Like, none of my Native American family like really like they struggle with pronouns, but they don't really care about me transitioning, for instance. what you get though is just kind of it's just a cultural thing. Well, not just a cultural thing, but I'm trying to think of the words here.
Is it because Native Americans on the res are functionally the closest thing we have in America to peasants? I mean, I know that sounds super insulting, and I don't mean it to be, but like
No,
I am.
I think it depends. There's a lot of differences between tribes, obviously, right? Like, but I think that is kind of the case. In some of the indigenous, like the Native American studies literature, they conceptualize the reservation system as kind of like the fourth world, right? Like within, like in Arizona, you can drive from Scottsdale, which is one of the like most wealthiest parts of the Phoenix metropolitan area, go past the freeway and you're in a reservation, and it's like driving into a third world country from like the Hilton. You know what I mean? Like it's mind-boggling how like in our own backyards there's such poverty, and the legal system is insane because there's like a degree of autonomy that they have that's like kind of outside the regular like legal system. But then when you get like a white person who isn't affiliated with the tribe at all committing a crime in Native American lands, a lot of times they can get away with it because there's just so much weird legal loopholes and jargon. That's why you get so much Native American women disappearing.
I was going to say the rape and kidnapping problem is because there's a legal gap. A friend of mine here who does a lot for the indigenous community here in Salt Lake. He's also a member of the nation. Moroni Benali has like been really patient with me trying to figure this stuff out. And when I realized, like, part of the reason why I realized how different it was is even in a fairly large and developed indigenous nation like the Navajo, who still have some portion of their ancestral lands, not much of it, but some. They can't get plumbing because it takes an act of Congress. Like literally, like it literally takes an act of Congress to like update infrastructure. Like I do remember vaguely in like the late Obama period where, some Republican lawmakers in Obama were just trying to get Congress to do anything to like put heating in schools for indigenous kids. And so when in the beginning of the pandemic, my partner had me work with Moroni to like get all this hand sanitizer, specifically hand sanitizer, because one of the reasons why the Navajo Nation got hit by coronavirus so hard is all the guidelines were written for people with running water, and they don't have that. Like, so like the using a hand sanitizer, even when they use water, neutralizes the water, but they were literally trying to do the sanitation regime given by the CDC, and spreading COVID that way, actually, because they were, it was in the water, and the Navajo Nation got a hold of it. But like, and they've turned it around basically partly because of, to give Moroni credit, part of what he was doing. And when I talk to Moroni about Marxism, he has some hostility to Marxist, even though he kind of is one. But he talks to me about when Mao, the only like political writings in the radical left that he relates to is when Mao and the anarchists are writing about like Chinese peasants, and that was what appealed to the way of life he grew up in. And I was like, and that's when it kind of clicked on me, like, oh, that there is a reason why that maybe there is a cultural conservatism, but I also and I'm gonna throw it to JG in a minute. I have a question for JG that contradicts what I'm about to do. But I was reading Pierre Bourdieu today on there's a famous essay he wrote, "There's no such thing as public opinion," and he talks about like trying to figure out like regressive positions amongst the popular classes, right? And he says one of the things you have to figure out is that the view, like the views of ethical and political are very different amongst working class and than amongst bourgeois managers, the professional strata, and even the petite bourgeoisie, because there's a different relationship to the state, and that leads to public opinion questions being highly misleading. And also, like Jake was bringing up, like the culture war bullshit plays differently. Christopher Lash talks about this a lot, that like people don't understand the American working class because they don't understand the issues that they're dealing with, partly because of this, and they read a lot of things that seem conservative that really aren't. But when you try to control popular narrative through opinion polls or whatever, that's going to come out looking like they're more conservative than they are.
I was actually going to bring that up at one point. I was talking to the last time I talked to Brace Belden from TrueAnon. He said to me, the thing people don't get about this culture war stuff is that like people's politics in this country culturally don't make any sense. Like you can't really easily put it all together because you'll hear one view and think, oh, they're a conservative. But then you'll hear someone say something else, and it'll be like diametrically opposed to what they just said, or seemingly so. And I think that feeds into what you just said, Derek. It's I don't know. I mean, this is only anecdotal, but the more I've been talking to people in the past few months leading up to the election, people around here in Florida, I just like, I don't know. American cultural politics makes no sense. I think it's just like a weird spectacle that people engage in. It's not. Yeah.
Does it make sense anywhere else? I don't know that it like.
No, I'm not sure it makes sense anywhere
there either. Like
our model is being exported. It's not the other way around. It's not like the old European socialists thought, well, America will catch up to Europe. No. We're, this dynamics unfold probably in a lot of places.
I can see how in the United States, like a sense of individualism being a kind of a important, I guess, personal value for people would lead people to be maybe more adventurous with their opinions, where it's like, well, sometimes I think this thing, but I also am free thinking enough to think this other thing.
Yeah.
Mark Twain was really big on that, right? He, like, as part of the American national character.
Like, I think there's probably less. I think maybe there's like less going along to get along, which breeds a certain kind of eccentricity.
The thing that gets me that I've been like seeing more, and maybe it's just like a Pennsylvania thing because we're a weird state, but I'm like, and I think it's like partially just people losing their minds over like quarantine and whatnot. I've just been seeing a lot of people that like, one second you'll hear them talking like a centrist liberal, and then the next second they're like turning into a QAnon person. It's like some weird Jekyll and Hyde thing. I mean, can't figure out the American voter anymore.
People are complicated, and like it's really interesting that you bring up Pennsylvania too, because on the other side of my family, they're Pennsylvania Dutch, and so there's these like fucking hillbilly ass fucking German people from Pennsylvania, which my dad was very like ashamed of actually when I was growing up, and my aunt, who still lives out in the small town out there, is like has like a trans son who's female to male, and has like always been super supportive of me, but she's like hard on like the Trump stuff and is like very critical of Black Lives Matter, and it's obviously not just in Pennsylvania. Like I think people are just complicated and have weird mixed match views in a way that it's hard to capture these, and I think our polling methods are really inadequate to really deal with that, especially since everything is divided into Republican and Democrat. People aren't Republican and Democrat.
And what Derek was saying kind of suggests like there's a class bias to the conceptualization of polling in the first place, right? Like your prejudices or the habitus of the pollsters is going to get into their worldview and the way that they ask people questions.
Well, one of the things never mind. I'll let you talk, Ezra. And then
Oh yeah, no, I was just going to respond to last like 15 minutes in one condensed sort of thing. Is that like as far as relating to your experiences on the res, The only thing that I have that even like resonates at all is like people that like my grandfather, my paternal grandfather, who's Romani Gypsy and lives in Munhall, Pennsylvania, just outside of Pittsburgh, which is like before, I don't know, people were putting, vegan like delis in Pittsburgh again, or big tech move there. It was just a deindustrialized kind of wasteland. It was majorly depressing. The sort of spectacle of of Romani people like that fled, the descendants of people that were fleeing the Holocaust, essentially, becoming really kind of rabidly racist in the United States. And I mean, if you want to talk about Americans don't understand Native American stuff, gypsy is like that's like a clothing style, like it's like not even on the map. And I don't know, I guess it was the only thing that I could sort of relate to, because they had a similar sort of like cruelty between themselves and other people in a similar situation, even if they are the same race, because because they're white.
Well, I bet that the thing that perhaps the more conservative leaning people and on the res might have in common with that kind of manification of Brahmani people is a resentment over what they perceive as like a prioritizing of Black people and the welfare state.
Yeah, I think that is true. That definitely led. One of my uncles has sort of said that to me explicitly. What about nationalism for us? And like, who's us? Like, who are you talking about there?
Right.
I mean, well, you saw that similarly in the South amongst like, I live in Utah now, but I grew up in Macon, which was 50-50, like 50% Black, 50% white, mostly poor on both. And the resentment at both sides over like basically welfare scraps was huge. And this is something that I don't know. Like, I don't hear, like, one of the things that I was going to bring up, JG, to tie it into what you and Jake are saying a bit, is I saw a lot of that. I also saw a lot of that actually in the Pennsylvania Dutch, weirdly too, like maybe because I've been married a bunch. Like my first ex-wife is from PA, from what she would lovingly call Pennsyltucky, outside of Harrisburg, near where the 9/11 plane went down, actually, Johnstown, between that area. And there's a similar kind of attitude of like, well, we've been left behind. And it was very strange for me when I would go out there, because her mother is like one of those people who spreads like Trump conspiracies about voting, not QAnon, but like about like mail-in voting being a communist plot, and yet was really, really good at a time when a lot of people in the United States weren't on queer issues. Like so it was, and my dad down in Georgia was a law and order, crush all those rioters kind of guy, but also was pro healthcare, and has over time dropped a lot of the crush rioter stance. Like he's I think the Bush years broke him, and he kind of became a Democrat, and he was vaguely kind of like Bernie, but he also liked Ross Perot, like, and so the way that class politics plays out when you overlay like the what is a fairly elite game in American partisan politics, it gets weird. Whereas if you look at issues and organizations, it doesn't as much. But one thing I do want to say, so I saw someone way back ask another question that then I'm going to turn it over to JG, because I want to turn this into that. Someone asked, well, what are the number of working class organizations that are independent in the United States? And the thing is, not a lot. I mean, 17% unionized. Most of that's public sector. And the unions that aren't public sector are often, frankly, kind of guild unions. We have seen unionization amongst franchises, but franchise unionization doesn't really work in the same way when they try, like when the IWW, God bless them because they're actually doing this again, but they try to franchise Burger World and they do it each individual site at a time, because you have to. It is almost impossible to do organization that way, and so like we don't have a good model for post-industrial. New union. I think tenants unions are being tried, but they're still kind of singular issue. Community, a lot of people throwing out proletarian community organizing, but the thing is that was tried by Saul Alinsky, and who did the best stuff with that? It wasn't any leftists, it was Phyllis Schlafly. Like they figured out how to use that.
Obama mobilized that Alinsky strategy pretty well.
But it's essentially it's kind of a conservativist strategy the way it actually ends up playing out. What I was
you have to give the right wingers credit. They're really good at what they do. I mean, Schlafly was really good at what she did, and I keep thinking back to like the origins of the John Birch Society in the I think it was like the 1950s, 1960s lately. That was all founded by like really rich Texas oil types like H.L. Hunt and like manufacturing, money people. But everyone like when they talk about the John Birch Society, they call it like a populist movement. It really was not founded as such. I mean, it was just founded to, give that sentiment, but not really push for that. And I think you see the same thing with a lot of like the so-called anti-establishment, Republicans, or the ones that sort of try to paint themselves like that, like Tucker Carlson and whatnot today.
And John Birch is more of a cadre cult than a mass party.
Yeah, I'm not saying they're like some huge thing.
No.
War, but yeah, I'm just saying it's yeah.
Well, I mean, one of the things that's interesting about the politics we have now is I remember when Tucker was, and he didn't change his positions much. Actually,
he was just a libertarian back
He's
in
just
the
a
day.
bow tie ass libertarian.
Right.
Literal bow tie.
Right. But that period after bow tie, when he would get up and like argue with Seth Alterman and stuff, he was the conservative that left liberals wanted to debate because he would grant them a lot of premises. He would grant them worries about conspiracies. He would grant them that all the neoconservative war stuff was bad, and he still kind of does. And so I do worry, like if to bring it back to the election about to like theory and purity politics and all that we might continue to be blindsided in this imperial haze that we're in, like as we are the great rotting pole in the middle of an increasingly multipolar world, that we don't really understand how to organize in a new way, and we don't really understand how to deal with these movements that are decoupling politics from class, because that is happening. It also happened in the UK. Like, it is not unique to America. This is why I pushed back on some of the on Tom when he was here a little bit, because like Labour, even under Corbyn, didn't reach much out of the London proletariat ever, and it seriously paid for it. And now Corbyn did try to do some fairly mild opposition when he didn't really matter anymore, and now he's out of the party. Like, so I think we're all kind of getting blindsided by how they're able to decouple this. And that's partly because they don't have anything to say to class, even though for the first time in a long time in America, we're actually talking about it. Like, when, prior to like 2008, people in America really did try to pretend that social class wasn't really a thing. Like,
well, that's the thing. Like, it's the decoupling is just a thing that's going to happen because they don't want class to be a factor, because they don't want to pay for anything. They don't want to offer people anything because they got to keep the entire thing is so reliant on everything being monetized, right? We can't deal with homelessness or rising real estate costs because so much capital is tied up in a real estate based asset price bubble. And you pop that's going to have reverberations down the entire line. And there's so much stuff like that. Like they just can't. And so yeah, we got to basically box any hint of class out of it by any means necessary, and that's why that's why they turn so heavily to identity politics, because that's just making sure that we have the exact right number of seats at the table for each particular group. And it's very useful to making meetings within organizations about progressive stack and whose feelings are hurt and whose aren't, and who's being represented, and who's being included and who, and all that's like it just becomes this I don't know, it becomes this kind of infinite recursion of how do we purify get these organizations to be a point where they're sufficiently pure that they can then reach into society and through their purity like heal society, like Jesus healing the leopards by touching them or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot, because I've also been thinking about like how not just that like white progressives or even white leftists like us don't really understand the communities of color, but like the activists of the communities of color don't actually seem to understand what's going on in their own communities very much either, with maybe the exception of the Black community that does seem to be a little bit more on par. But like it's amazing how far off a lot of the activists seem to be from the mainstream of whatever sub-demographic group. And you can't generalize about that anyway, honestly, but like, and that's this weird paternalistic thing that we've all been doing for a while. But also like I actually do think like Adolf Reed, as much as he annoys me sometimes, although as a side note, one of his kids is friends with Jason. But as much as he's right about that there has been this kind of like not just an entrepreneurial class in like the communities of color that people are not getting blindsided by. There is a professional activist class that does seem to be largely speaking to white people and doesn't seem to know exactly what's going on, on the block or whatever.
That was
I always
driven
felt
home.
that's what the whole
Black Lives Matter as an organization, Black Lives Matter as a hashtag decentralized, when cops are killing people in the street, sort of fight back tendency.
I always I was gonna say real quick, I always thought that was that what that whole Latin X stuff was about? Was that just like professional activist class language? Because I've never met like a person in real life who uses that term. Was that like one of those type of deals, or
we're gonna figure this out tonight?
I mean, it's a bit deflationary, but kind of, yeah.
It does have a history in Argentina, but as Latin, but interestingly,
I wasn't trying to ask to be disrespectful.
But when I brought that up to a person to a queer person of Latino background, they laughed at me and said, "Well, the Argentines are white too." So I was like, "I'm out." Like I'm not
we need like a hotline for people to call in or whatever. Like if you identify as Latinx, call 188 Emancipation. We could sort it out.
A few research councils probably beat us to it.
There's one more thing I at least wanted to like touch on if we could, and it was the reason I mentioned like weird Birchers, because it feels like we're in this situation today where we have these like weird right-wing cults arising, and mainly I'm talking about QAnon, which apparently they now have won a seat in Georgia.
Well, someone who says they believe it, but I don't think that lady's like 100% like balls deep QAnon,
Okay, see, I was under the impression. Well, I'm just. What do you guys think of this whole? Like, is she the only one? Are there other people getting into Congress that are like QAnon or adjacent?
Who won primaries, but they didn't seem to win. But the other thing is QAnon shit is weird in a sense. Like someone
is it?
But like the Cold Black Star, the guy who used to do Cold Black Stars. I won't mention his name because he doesn't like it mentioned. But like he asked, like, how influential is QAnon? And we all basically said no one knows, because you can believe parts of QAnon, and it's a buffet of weird shit. So like you can believe that there's a cabal around JFK. Like like you'll meet people who are basically Democrats who are kind of dip their toes in it.
I mean, in 100 years, when
There's
people are like,
QAnon Democrats now. What?
in 100 years, when people are like in like small colonies hovered around the poles, that like people from different city states will all like trek to somewhere in like northern Alberta to have the first like Q ecumenical council, and they'll sit down like the basic doctrine.
Can't wait the Q religious wars and like the Q schismatics.
The Council of Edmonton.
Yeah, the Council of Edmonton. You know, like one of Justin Trudeau's like great grandson, who's like the emperor of you know like the remnants of like the United States or whatever it's called at that point. You know,
Well,
he'll convert to Q at last and like unite the two split sections of the empire.
Well, I do want to say one thing about Canada
of the declining Atlanticist empire that stretches around like the northern pole.
Writer.
Sorry, progressive stack. Americans first.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I've been trying to respect that. You know, y'all are talking about your own country. I do want to say one thing about my own country, which is I think increasingly it is clear in Canada, in a way that it hasn't necessarily been before, that we are tied to this dying hegemon in a very serious way. So when you say that Canada is exactly like America, I think that's wrong. But when you say that Canada is like inextricably tied to America, and I think that has consequences for where Canadian politics is going to go. And I think it's becoming increasingly clear as America becomes increasingly out to lunch.
Yeah, no joke, if I was you, Kyle, like I would vote for whoever promised to build the Canadian Maginot Line. Because like shit's gonna get real in about 40 years.
Yeah,
no
I was
joke.
about to say we're gonna want your water. So
that's been a real thing. Like that's been a real struggle, and it's only because of Indigenous people in Canada that it's not all gone already. Like they haven't just bought it all up.
Yeah. I mean, although like Canada is sort of like an evil oil company with a progressive like hat on, like
evil slash. It's a mining / oil company. The mining part is less well known, but we're up there with Australia as the largest mining companies in the world, and extremely evil.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
So you are like when everyone shows the Democrats with the smiley balloons, like actually that is sort of what I think Canada is like the smiley balloon over the evil, you know, extraction magnet that's really kind of backdoor working for the US, like as you know, with legacy admission, pretty boy PM who, you know, everybody in America used to want to sleep with. And
yeah,
well, a legitimate son.
Yeah.
I buy that. I actually buy that theory 100%.
How can you buy that? He looks, as he gets older, he looks exactly like his dad. Like he's changed his facial hair and his hair and stuff. He looks more and more like his father every year. I cannot believe he's Castro's son. I hate him because he's a princeling, but you know, he's a princeling. He is. He's not Castro's son.
Oh, God. Well, I imagine that the like urban-rural divide, town and country, has its operations in Canada too. Is it like when Canadian election results come in? Is it as polarized as the same thing? Because I think something that when you look at American politics, it's almost like I don't know. I stopped seeing it because it's so obvious. And it wasn't until I was looking at that map of Pennsylvania and wondering if the whole election, you know, is about the state and which part of the state doesn't have the votes came in. Oh, it's around Pittsburgh. Oh, it's around Philadelphia. So like, oh, okay. So that's going to Biden. Like, right. Like instantly. Like, can you do that kind of rounding in Canadian politics? In terms of the urban-rural divide, absolutely, in most of the country. So you look at recently in British Columbia, they had a provincial election, and it's like Lower Mainland plus
Victoria, Lower Vancouver Island went Social Democrat, NDP. So the NDP won. And the rest of the province pretty much all went Liberal, which is the Tories like parasite infested another party called the Liberal Party after they were wiped out, and created that. So it didn't used to be that way as much because of like lumber mills in the hinterland, which would vote Union Social Democrat, but that's all gone. So it is basically like you would expect. However, you come to a province like Alberta, and you do see that phenomenon happening at the provincial level, but you do not see it happening at the federal level. Or at the federal level, there's Edmonton will go either Liberal or NDP, and the rest of the province will go straight Tory across the board. So we're like in the middle of a city here. It's just it's not even contested. Like the other parties barely even run candidates because they just know they'll lose. So I think like Alberta has a very strong kind of like red state tribal identity that has been built up over the period since Trudeau's father tried to do the national energy program and basically, use Albertan oil at a discount to build up manufacturing in Eastern Canada as part of like a national accumulation strategy. And the resentment from that has basically built a political identity here that has lasted since then, and it operates at the federal level consistently. So, yeah, for the most part, you have that kind of urban-rural divide modified by the fact that there's a multi-partisan system. It's not just two parties. And then also modified by regionalisms that kind of like push it to an extreme where even an urban place like Calgary, there's only a tiny pocket that might even consider voting anything other than Tory.
Right. I was about to say the Maritimes are weird too, because like when I was in Scotia, like they were not super Tory even when you were out in the Fisher lands. But that was also
they generally vote Liberal because of like the history of basically state welfare after the fisheries collapsed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a very strange system. I mean, one of the things that I've been trying to study in the South is we have a similar weirdness. Like the Republicans were hated for 100 years for two reasons. One was the racial stuff. There's no way around that. And Democrats for some reason didn't pay that premium until 2000. But they finally got associated with like, oh, Black people have been voting for you in 2/3 since the 30s. And then the other thing is, the South is hyper dependent on military Keynesianism because it was strategically underdeveloped and hampered on industrializing for fear that if it did, it would try to rise again. So like there is a kind of weird class politics in the South.
It's the East Germany of America.
Yeah, kind of. There's a book called Culture of Defeat that actually compares East Germany, Japan, and the Southern United States, and talks about how their class politics and stuff align up really closely. Like
Japan just barely escaped that fate because of the Korean War and China going communist. If it hadn't, it would have been the same thing, underdeveloped systematically. That was the plan. Right.
I mean, and which anyway, what the other thing I'm interested in is do you think the left is still going to be really, beating off to monetary schemes and stuff in the next 4 years in America? Because like QE right now, I've talked about this a lot of places, but QE has basically been MMT for the rich. And you actually do see inflation. That inflation is what's keeping the stock market afloat, like explicitly. And there was a little crash under Trump, and now it's actually back up today. It's happy about Biden. So like, What do you guys make of that? You think that ties into this whole like suburban, like Democrats are like the party of the lower middle class, the poor, and the super rich because of weird monetary bullshit? Like,
I think the super rich thing might only be a Trump specific thing. I think it might split again after he's out, depending on how the Republican Party goes. If it doubles down, then you're going to see the realignment stick. But
it's
I
not
think
doubling down here in Utah. Like, they're talking about they need to be a party of like compassion and of people of color and of a fair entrepreneurial justice for the oppressed. That's where they're talking here.
Mormons are a voting bloc within the Republican Party that are capable of withdrawing support when they don't like where things are going, which the Democrats, for the most part, we are all too browbeaten to do, like, on the left, let's say.
Well, I mean, also the evangelicals are too the evangelicals are too browbeaten to do. That's the other thing that people actually aren't really looking at is like the evangelicals
exactly right.
Concentration in Trump is because they're dying. Like, it's not it's not any other reason.
They did have something more cohesive than a lot of left wing stuff. Maybe the labor union was the only thing that was even close. But we saw that basically dying off in our lifetime. And Mormons are way more centralized. So yeah, I believe that in the Utah GOP, but the national GOP. I mean, if they're not going, Kanye or whoever. Which probably blew his wad. But if they don't have a sort of spectacular antagonistic figure to put up in 4 years, like, what's going to happen there? Like, does Biden somehow senile before the primary sail on to 8 years?
I doubt it. I highly doubt it. I mean, one, I don't think he's even. I don't think he's even going to run for a second term. I think he's going to try to hand it off to Kamala Harris. But two, how in the blue fuck are you going to start off in a lame duck presidency and like during a crisis and somehow like become popular enough to
become popular? Somehow become popular. This is not
right.
It's not a candidate anyone was voting for, really. But yeah, how's it?
The polls absolutely support that.
Yeah,
like, it's clear that people were voting against Trump on the Democratic side, and more, though not overwhelmingly, but more so for Trump on the Republican side.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it kind of means like the Democratic Party right now is a brand without a fucking identity at all. Like it doesn't even really believe in its head.
So one thing that with all this talk we've had about like misunderstanding people of color voting blocks and so on, it does strike me that maybe the Democratic Party does have an identity to the extent that like Shachtmanite Harringtonian politics of realignment have kind of become a common sense. Like, not in terms of like actually being a left thing, but in the sense of this is our coalition, this is our common sense of how people are going to work together for us.
Well, that was always the thing is though. Christopher Lasch in 1969 or maybe it was 71 wrote a little article on Harrington when Harrington was trying to like revive the rough populace for McGovern. And he pointed out that this has been a strategy that Democrats have basically lost with for 100 years, and that populist and left movements have died by making the deal over and over and over again.
Yes. Which was at the point that Jacobin was saying, Biden talking about government spending is a turning point. I was like, nope. I'm staying far the hell away from that.
Yeah,
that's death. That way death lies.
That's a full tank of copium right there.
Yeah, we're gonna have to like. I think in one way, to be honest, like the way this is all played out is one of the only way that that Biden could win and like the left podcast industry survive. And and that and the other thing is we really are going to have to strike out on a different identity and really think about organizing, because there is like one of the things I will say, there is organizing going on, but it's so sporadic and incoherent and like piecemeal and local, and I'm not talking about the DSA anymore. Like it's you see 1,000 little movements that it's kind of like the new communist movement in the 70s, where like if they had coalesced around something, they would have been almost as big as the SPA in the 19 teens, but they didn't, and they died. So
what we need is a big organization with resources and the will to direct those resources towards something specific.
Yeah.
So we're fucked.
I mean,
Is that what you're saying? Because
but you see the problem here, right? Because the way people approach activism, it's like everybody wants their little thing, right? Which is a huge problem. So you basically need to be able to say, no, we're going to, for strategic reasons, going to prioritize certain things, and to a certain extent that requires a vision and it requires a plan. It requires a program. You know.
Yeah.
It requires a completely different type of person than the people who normally do activism to prioritize those things over sort of demonstrating their individuality through building a fiefdom. Like it's a political culture problem, and political entrepreneurship, that is traditionally the sort of counter elite strategy for building coalitions to challenge power. Capitalism really does require something qualitatively different to overthrow it than anything else that's come before.
The left, as it exists right now, has been very much in this mode of like, well, we can have 1,000 little organizing, a few riots, and then like some kind of left Mount parallel society where we can just be like, we're just going to wait till the next crisis, and we're going to be intellectuals, and we'll be able to step in. And even from a Leninist vanguardist perspective, that never made a whole lot of sense. I mean, a lot of the Leninist understanding of the early 20th century is also kind of false, but I mean, like that doesn't even like follow from that at all. And there's been this renewed like attempt at popular frontism amongst all kinds of groups, and we got to cut that shit out. We are not. We don't have like, what mass line are we attaching to? Right. Like, and I want to talk about something because like I do a lot of activist work here in Salt Lake, and I am actually sort of like I was sitting down with some anarchists, and we were doing what we called the NGO industrial complex map. And what we were looking at was not how many like NGOs were directly bought out by this, that, and the other. We did that too, but also how many grassroots groups were getting logistics from NGOs who were getting money from other groups, and how that was channeling things because of where the logistics would go. And some say, I dare not call it astroturfing, because in some ways it isn't. Like this is a real grassroots movement, but it is very captured in pernicious ways because of the entrepreneurial way that a lot of the left organizes. And then, as a side note, there's this whole left media sphere, which we're all a part of, that gets blindsided by every fucking thing. We like how many, like when I said in the beginning, like I felt good because at least if I was less wrong than most of everybody else, and I was still pretty wrong. Like, because like there is like, and I don't want to like, there's been this boom in that as an expression of left like, organizing or whatever, but it's been so disconnected from what's going on, and I don't know what to do about that.
I mean, I think the thing to do, in my experience with Redneck Revolt, the issue that we ran into, we were a group specifically trying to get out of the left kind of cultural activist sphere or the theory media sphere, right? But what ended up happening, and we vetted people, right? But But what ended up happening was that we still got way too many left activist types and cultural types, and Leninists in particular, even though we were explicitly like an anarchist styled organization, that these activist types just mucked up the whole thing and made it about the left again, right? And so what you need to do is you need to be a left-wing org that isn't catering to the left. And
which is tough because that's where you're going to see your biggest growth at the start, right? Because they're the most enthusiastic people about being on the left.
Yeah, we need a group of Trekkies that isn't full of Star Trek fans.
Well, let's talk about the other problem though, because I know people are going to always talk about Nazbols or whatever, but there really is a sense in which there is a hardcore cultural opposition to trying to do that very thing we're talking about, while also a lot of the people who are attracted to do it, and I'm looking at like the quote unquote class reductionists, really do have some pernicious ideas, even when they're correct. I mean, one of the things I'm going to say is like some of the class reductionist analysis we got before this, like from the Bell, or what's that one? Whatever with the new public the Bellows, and like a little less on Unheard, like it wasn't entirely wrong about like the weird racial ascension being blindsiding people and all this, but they'll take that and then it'll flip. Like my problem with class reductionism is honestly it's not class reductionist enough. Like it really isn't. Like it's not. They're like white. They have this weird like workerist understanding of class that isn't really reductive to anything. But they weren't as wrong as we would have liked them to be, frankly. And I don't know how you deal with this whole double tendency of like, we can't cater to the left, but we also can't cater to weirdos who are going to try to turn left-wing values into like some kind of cultural conservatism plus like, maybe a welfare state. Like,
this is why anti-politics first appealed to me, right? Because like you have to understand, like I got into the Emancipation Network first through like participating from Alpha to Omega, right after my stint in Redneck Revolt. And Redneck Revolt was basically like collapsed by that point. And one of the things that attracted me to this was anti-politics before that kind of blew up.
Before it got too Australian.
The
Australian moments just kept, following each other, and you just had just full-time Australianism. It's
heated Aussie moments.
Yeah, heated Aussie
Aussie takes. Yeah,
bad. It's a bad look.
But yeah, like the issue. So some of the people from Redneck Revolt kind of pivoted more towards like libertarian, and like they still remained anarchists or whatever, but they like just didn't want to be anything to do with the left because they felt burnt, and so they went towards libertarians. But the issue is still the same there. The issue isn't really the left, unlike what the Aussie poll people think. The issue is people who are politically and instrumental and motivated by their own little cults and fiefdoms and all these things. We need to get past politically motivated people as far as organizing and get towards workers, right?
Well, here's the thing. I'm going to invoke some stuff that has been disheartening to me the more I study the actual workers' movement. Mm-hmm. That never happened in the core of capital anywhere. It really didn't. And the reasons for that is partly because one of the weird ironies of proletarianization is once most people are proletarianized, all these sectorial and sectional battles and all these other things that are tangential seem a lot more important because the only people are technically also some slightly better off form of quasi-proletariat. And it leads to people there's all this kinds of attempts to redefine social class outside like Marxism plus blah, going all the way back probably to the 1920s, definitely after Mao. And that's because it's trying to answer that problem. And there's also all this weird stuff with a strata that isn't really a class, but
Right.
isn't also like not like there is like the intellectual strata has been mucking up the left for a long time, yet we totally need them. Like, but they're the ability that they've had to divorce themselves from larger popular movements through NGOs, through academia, through professionalization, through HR. I mean, weirdly, like HR is now like quasi
The vanguard.
like, yeah. I mean, what do you do with that problem? That's, I mean, because you can't exclude those people. I mean, in a way, like similar problems happened in the Soviet Union when like you talked about like the Soviet Union really needed a professional managerial class. It tried to create one out of workers. Like, seriously, it tried to just, you have the old elite educate the workers so that they can step in and become it.
Bye, JG. Bye, JG.
Yeah, we're losing the normies. JG and I often rant about low information leftism. As a side note, I wanted to talk about that, which is like all theory, no inputs. But what do we do with that? Because if we're going to talk about like a left organization that can do this stuff, we have models of things that have hit cul-de-sacs. And I'm not saying there's nothing to be learned from the 20th century. There definitely is. Like, but
I think one of the most promising avenues we have now is to try to like break open the conversation around police brutality, and try to make that like a larger working class issue. And I don't think that even needs to cut against Black Lives Matter, because the general claim of there's a lot of autonomy among BML chapters, but like, the brand that we have one really good one and one that's like this guy is like a bootlicker who loves Sheriff Joe. Among the branch that's like really solid out here, and I've worked with them a lot, they're my go-to example of like the kind of group that really tries to practice intersectionality in like a meaningful way, and I know it's kind of like a buzzword, but this group came out to the Daniel Shaver protest, for example, when this white guy was murdered like very brutally by Mesa PD, because he had like a little pellet gun he used to kill rodents, and somebody saw him and thought he was like going to do like a shooting, and so the cops came in here and just fucking murked him. And so I think there is a willingness. You just have to not be, a workerist, not a class reductionist, but like a workerist about it. You have to not center a workerist identity and uphold that as like the most important thing, but have to build solidarity by class and have to say like, it is true per capita that Black people and Native Americans are killed more by police and are incarcerated more by police. But it is also true that in pure numbers, more white people than anyone else is locked up and murdered because
because it's 75% of the population.
Exactly.
It's also true that the lowest quintile, the lowest 20% of white people are killed at a higher percentage than like the fourth quintile of Black people. So I mean, it's not totally cut and dry by race. There's definitely a class angle, and it's not that there isn't disproportionate police brutality up the racial ladder or something. It's just like poor whites also have grievances with the police. Mm-hmm. There is a way to conduct a movement against police violence and the state, really, that can build a coalition, and there's a way of doing it that will not build a coalition. Mm-hmm. Which way?
So yeah, I think it's not cutting against Black Lives Matter. It's cutting against the way that this discussion has been framed. Because we talked earlier about how class is shut out of the conversation. Mm-hmm. And I think the most dramatic way that's happened that I've seen recently was with these protests following the death of Floyd, right? Like it was really an aggressive effort to say, like, to just erase from reality the possibility that this was a proletarian movement. Like, just not even talk about it. Don't bring it up at all. Do lots of counter messaging about it. It was really aggressive and quite effective, actually, at breaking that possibility. So I do think that there's a strong need to fight that way that things are being framed. I don't know how you do that, though, when the media is really like on board with that.
They're not, and they're good at co-opting. Like, how many Black Lives Matter people have been hired by media companies recently? Actually, more than you would. It's surprising.
Yeah.
And so you also see these splits, and like in Utah too, we have 3 Black Lives Matter group. One is increasingly, it's like, somebody's talking about diversifying the FBI while invoking the Black Panthers, while there's another one, and also like making like we have another one up in the north, like doing joint events with the Proud Boys, to show like unity. Yeah. And then we have and then you have a more militant one here that's in a legal dispute with the other one. And so, I get all these issues. I also think like the appeal of racial nationalism in America is something I think is hard for people who are, I don't know, Canadians and people from Latin countries should get it, but I get Europeans not really understanding it. The settler colonial thing is real.
They already have racial nationalism.
Yeah, they already have racial nationalism. Like, sometimes it's Le Pen, sometimes it's Sweden.
Well, Stalin and Hitler sorted out that question in the Second World War. Honestly,
yeah. I mean, also Stalin did something that no one else could do, which was and did it along Leninist lines, and then it backfired on him, which was sort of ethnically sort Central Europe. No one else had been able to do that ever.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
come on, tribes, you're Kazakhs now. Just get over it. Like,
yeah. And then, why are there these weird reactionary, like, nationalist movements? Oh crap, what am I gonna do? Russification, that'll work. We have no idea why everyone's resentful by 1981.
Well, I think an answer to that, though, is to build solidarity. Oh, good night, Jake.
Bye, Jake.
Bye, Jake.
To try to build solidarity, but also to really focus on autonomy as the solution. Like, to just trust that, like, post rev or whatever, like the goal that we're all going to, right? I know it seems ridiculous, but hear me out. That people who already live together in their, in groups, Black neighborhoods, largely Latino areas, etc., they can organize and build a community the way that makes sense for them, right? And just trust that that's going to work out. I mean, that sounds kind of like, I don't know, almost religious, but I think kind of going back to the idea of autonomy that you hear in cybernetics, which is something that Kyle could probably talk more on, I think it's the best way to handle that. Like, we don't need to impose some kind of grand model of, Leninist communism upon, different communities that have legitimate differences and legitimate different antagonistic relationships to settler colonialism.
But
yeah, the only place I disagree with that is in white strongholds that need aggressive affirmative action to sort of,
Yeah.
because a lot of that stuff is, collective resources or like, big, like influential groups that need to be like, I don't know, if you can't liquidate all the forms of class power, you do need to, any apparatus that remains has to be at least proportionate. And I know that plenty of liberals will find that fine.
Well, I think part of what has to happen too, at least in like, in this scenario, like up in the post-United States, is there has to be a restoration of indigenous power, not just like a check or like, healthcare, but like actual power over their traditional lands.
Yeah. I guess to try to tie this back to the election, the closest thing we had to a vision was something like more checks, like, you know, like, hey, you know, more healthcare, more checks. So what more do you people want? You know, like, but you know, I will say it's the closest thing to an actual vision. It's not just, oh, he's not that guy. You know, the Sanders campaign is the only one that was actually running on a vision. And when they were out the picture, we were basically, what happened tonight is sort of like the best case realistic scenario. Like if Biden wins, right? Like that's
Leibniz was right. Best of all possible worlds.
Best of all possible worlds. Yeah, and I mean, Biden's hands being tied says bad things for, you know, Democratic priorities, but there'll also be rot across the board. When do we see movements, left-wing movements, for the most part? Like, yeah, the you know, the Black Lives Matter stuff under Trump was a real, like, you know, that's an outlier. Usually you see sort of right-wing things pop up under Democrats and left-wing things pop up under Republicans. Excuse me. Yeah, I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that I'm getting my trends confused. It's late, but Occupy happened under a Democrat, right?
Right.
Like,
and the anti-war movement in the 60s that led to the Economist Amendment happened under Democrats, and actually Nixon was able to sap it. And you know, that's also true for Black nationalism. So you're right on those trends.
And like, when you do have a left-wing uprising or left-wing coded uprising under a Republican, goes directly to the Democrats,
right?
Because they're the resistance, they're the opposition.
I mean, but fringe groups appear great as the opposition under their. I mean, like look at, for example, like white nationalism under Obama versus under Trump. Like it actually has, like, it's morphed into a weirder force. Like QAnon. Like, I really do think there's a sense that, like, QAnon is like, well, white nationalism is not so appealing. Proud Boy stuff is a little bit too blatantly culturally chauvinistic. Let's have a satanic conspiracy cult that you know has plausible deniability on blood libel, but peeps, I want to be the cynical realist for a second. I always talk about how populists don't have like a class analysis enough, you know, and they're too cynical and to show me the money, but show me the fucking money. Because all these left movements got money from somewhere, not their own membership generally. Like, that is a hard limit. Like, I want to believe that, like, doing mutual aid and talking to people, that builds socialist stuff on localities. It really does, right? That's good stuff. But so far, to jump that bridge, you need money. And where the communist movements got it and the socialist movements got it, but before the SPA was organic like this. But everything else after that point had foreign or some kind of geopolitical strategy, money being poured into it. Even in the case of, like, there's a reason why Lenin got through Germany off of, you know, there you can't knock that out. And so, like, I'm all about people power and stuff, but you got to be realistic about where this money is. And one of the things you run up to with the just game it out, like do a map on how much you have to invest in mass mutual aid versus local mutual aid as a strategy to build a left organization. And you'll see, like, you'll start eating up all your money just trying to build cadres. Like, you'll get stuck. You won't be able to deliver anything to those cadres, which is what happened with the New Communist Movement. So you won't keep them. So, like, they'll just disappear. You will have a constant churn, and you'll mostly attract students and other people with a lot of time and not a lot of responsibilities. Like that we have to be realistic with in our plans. Otherwise, that's why we get sucked in by the Democrats, because when it's opposition, like, we all know that Antifa is going to get plastic knived in about a week. Like we know this.
Yes.
And they're not useful anymore. And our opportunism on this money question is a large. I mean, like, why is Jacobin doing what Jacobin's doing? Why did the Nation do the same thing in the 40s? Why did Mother Jones do the same thing in the 70s, 80s? Like, we see this shit in cycles, and it's largely around the gap between organization and national projects involving money.
Yeah, see, that's what drives people towards localism, is that if you want something that can branch out to the size of a fucking continent, it requires its own infrastructure. And so I don't know, like, when I think about this question, you know, like, it makes me very skeptical that things beyond local initiatives can be, like, you know, reasonably members' dues funded and, like, are kind of have, you know, workers in the driver's seat. And like, I don't like this kind of localism. The whole thing that appeals to me about cybernetics, the ability to scale. Most people that talk about scaling are opportunists, like that want that centralized apparatus position. But it is an issue, and we, like, not only nationally, honestly, we need to be able to coordinate across international lines, you know, and have, you know, kind of similar goals across national lines, and create something like a political culture that isn't as nationally bounded, so we can, you know, operate on a different kind of political rationality. Because stay chained to the short-termist political rationality, even, you know, the forums like Bernie Sanders or whatever, we're going to be doing Groundhog Day. And Bernie Sanders was just the most refined, most, like,
successful,
sympathetic and successful version of Dennis Kucinich or whoever else is the, I'm sorry, sheepdog in the Democratic primary to lure you in, get your hopes up before you, you know, bite the bullet and vote for a Dixiecrat.
Yeah, I mean, like, me and Mike Gravel had that, you know, like that same thing in 2008, right? Like, I ended up going in for Mike Gravel, ended up canvassing for Obama until I saw who he appointed for his cabinet, and I was like, well, fuck it. Like, that was one of my many breaking points. But, like, when you look, I just think we have to be more serious about dealing with this money and elite problem when we go into this, because the other thing I've noticed, if we want to talk about the weirdo trends that related to the election, like, when Bernie died, you do have this emergence of anarchism, and people are blaming that as what undermined Bernie, which is funny because it's more the result of Bernie being undermined.
Yeah. But
it's an incoherent ass anarchism too. It's not like, you got anarchists who are MMTers, you got anarchists who are Maoist adjacent, you got anarchists who, like, hang out with Stalinists all the time.
Anarchists. You have anarchists.
Bernie's still alive. Like, Bernie's dead.
Yeah. No. Rest in peace, Bernie Sanders. You know. Yeah, I mean, and on the other side, you also have people that are so aggrieved by the Sanders campaign. This is something that I think at risk of sounding like I'm denying the lived experience of some activists, I don't really think Bernie bros were that much of a thing. I just kind of don't. And now I kind of think they're like the spiritual, you know, children of the ideal form of Bernie bro that was summoned, you know, because it needed to exist. The aggrieved, like, you weirdos ruined our social democracy because you wanted to use progressive stack or something. Like, that's going to intensify in a way that we didn't see before. And the sort of, I don't like the terms Nazbol or Strasserist or whatever, because it kind of all glosses over that this is an imminent tendency in social democracy.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
Yeah.
Maybe the most honest way of talking about it is a third period phrase, the social fascists. Or, like, there's no really good way to talk about it, but it's like that tendency is going to intensify among people who are still dedicated to being sort of electorally oriented, hate the Democratic Party, rightfully, for doing, you know, what the Democratic Party does. But, you know, have a sort of totalized reaction. They can't just keep being leftists that want to appeal outside the left. Something about that formula is very hard.
Mm-hmm.
So they become non-leftists that appeal outside the non-left.
Yeah, post-leftist, right?
Well,
I mean,
like,
and
yeah, even post-leftists kind of cut in two directions as
well,
like
yeah,
sad, depressed leftists and rightists.
right. I mean, one of the things that I've noticed is like post-leftist means something to us, but if you like read like Center Discourse, like Tablet Magazine, they're referring to, they somehow lump Glenn Greenwald in that group, also with Amy Therese in that group, and there are overlaps, but their concerns are entirely different. And like, because I don't think Nagel, for example, really that much cares about certain kinds of U.S. foreign policy, even though they talk about it kind of. But when you look at like, that's all that someone like Michael Tracy actually really cares about. So, but even then, if you look at like, they have paymasters that limit what they can do too. Like, truly, like there's certain things Glenn Greenwald would never go after.
This is very profitable. It's a profitable way of being. So you don't have to claim being right wing, but you function as a reactionary. You know, it's the relentless counter signaling. Doesn't work for everybody, but if you can make it work for you, very, very lucrative business.
It's a good grift. It's a good grift. And like, you know, some of the more pernicious ones aren't even the people we're talking about. And I'm not going to name names, but there are all kinds of groups that have figured out a way to like, I can be an anti-leftist and still invoke Marx all the time. And and there's a long tradition of that. We're going to see that increase, I think. Particularly given the weird way that the racial essentialist narrative the Democrats were spinning has fallen apart a little bit. That's they're gonna take that as justification, and not entirely unfairly. Like I said earlier, like they weren't entirely wrong about that. But man, because I was thinking about this too, because I was thinking about the Glink problem and the problem with paymasters, and how many times on the left. Now I'm going to be honest in a way that I don't normally am dishonest, but like how many times on the left I've hit a wall because I realized we had a secret funder somewhere, like who was limiting what we could do as a publication or whatever. Now, I will actually say weirdly about Patreon and everyone complaining about like the PMC Patreon grift or whatever, like that has removed a lot of this problem. It's kind of weirdly
legit the only way. No, that's legitimately the only way that, you know, I could start a podcast project, like piss off, you know, 3/5 of the people involved and, you know, still make a little money on the side doing that. Like, you know, because there wasn't someone holding the reins that had all the money in the bank. Like,
well, and to like kind of bridge that to like, if you're doing like an edutainment, I guess, kind of like podcast, lefty podcast project, and you tie that to an organization, right? You have a legitimate thing that you're presenting that you can ask for money through Patreon and you can give them perks and stuff. And that makes a lot of sense. And that'll be a source of extra income. But then if you also have an organization that's doing, I guess, more activism kind of stuff that Stu's paying, that's also going to be an additional source of income.
Yeah, that would be great. But I mean, like, as an organization, I'm just going to talk about scale because I remember people telling me, like, oh, we can, like, mutual aid doctors' clinics or something like 4 years ago. And me going, are you insane? And the reason why I want to bring that up, because I think a lot of those people realize how crazy it is when they start to try to do it. About scale, because those people don't make. I'm not going to name names again, but those people haven't maintained that position. I ran into that way back in our Red Party days before Trump. Like I wrote this long thing about the limits of base building. It was, you know, because I had got into this mutual aid as dual power. You know, that's our way. You know, based off Lenin, not even anarchist models, like, you know, early Soviet stuff, right? And I realized that the reason why it had only really worked, it only really seems to work in periphery countries, and usually actually with religious groups, not with left groups. Like the Bolsheviks are really the only left group that's actually really pulled it off. Everybody else needs cross, like you need PB support or something like that. Like that's why Hamas and the Brotherhood were much better at doing it than anything in a like capitalist core country, because of the funding differences and the way that like you had an ideology that could bridge cross class. And like if we start appealing to cross class myths, we have so sold out. Like how are we not social fascists at that point? So like the bind's real. It's almost as real as its internationalism bind. In some ways, like internationalism does seem to hurt, you know, a lot of the average sectoral workers, and when it's manifested. But if you don't do internationalism, as we Perowski and all that, we mention this all the time, you are game theoried into standard liberalism every time. Like there's no way around it.
It's math. So I don't know. Are we still talking about the election?
Yeah, I would talk about the left.
I think we're talking about, you know, a small corner of the political landscape after the election, and I think every corner of the political landscape in America is some kind of fucked. Like,
yeah,
no one came out of this like triumphant, and everybody's gonna be in a kind of localized bind, and we're talking about the bind that the left is in within that context.
So
yeah,
I suppose it is sort of realistic then, because this is the most demoralizing victory you could have if anyone wins, you know. And I mean, I guess someone's going to win, you know, technically, but you know, what a victory it will be.
I will say this: it is not the 18th premier of Joe Biden, because when Louis Bonaparte became emperor, he was not in the position that Joe Biden is in now.
No,
he really wasn't.
People were excited.
Yeah. So I will say, you know, that's my final statement on that whole chapter of analysis. I was wrong, Derek. I was wrong, just like everyone else. It wasn't the 18th premier of Joe Biden.
Well, I mean, it's just history sometimes rhymes like through a warped record, and it's set on fire and melting. Like I have got like I am getting this like maybe like Nissim Talib, who's kind of a crank and a weirdo and a reactionary, but like this whole like black swan problem is really throwing, because it's not that any singular problem is unprecedented. It's that everywhere across the world, and this is like there's so much shit because of climate change, because of all these feedback loops that are now really beginning to pay off, that we're like, I got nothing, because like we have a model for one of these events, but not 5 in a year. Like,
right.
Like, so you know,
so Sophia and I were just thinking about like, I don't know, is there going to be like kind of reactionary violence around here? You know, in Arizona, you know, that's not like a crazy
gun malicious state.
Yeah,
that's one thing we didn't talk about the election is the predicted sectarian violence.
Yeah, but like, you know, we were just trying to like run through the variables and really think about like, I don't know, should we buy a gun now? And it's like, God, how do you even like, this is just slightly above stochastic. It just got a little like, you know, structural demographic theoretical bump. Like, it's so close to being a stochastic event. You do have Trump on Twitter, and like maybe every third post is like, this tweet misrepresents a civic process. Like, you know, saying, oh, these votes, these extra votes coming in, they're so mean. Oh, they're so terrible. He's kind of, it's a little pathetic. He's like pissing.
What I was fascinated with living in a red country and having friends who are conservatives, you know, I still do talk to them because I deal with real people. One thing that I think is everybody was afraid of counterviolence. Everybody was afraid of counterviolence.
Yes.
Which led me to believe that maybe this was like this weird partisan thing that both sides have been flirting with, actually leading to stasis where it cancels each other out. Because like there's so much movement that we're all like, what do we even do? Like, Who's doing what? No one won. Like why? Like if the Democrats stole the election, they clearly did it shittily. Like
Yeah, like
they couldn't even steal the Senate. Like. Like, I mean,
Well, that's not what they want. They don't want. They don't want to have to govern. This is something out of the divine left, Jean Baudrillard. It's just like, look, no one wants to govern. Like when people elect somebody, they're like kind of shoving them in front of a stage and hoping for them to fall and fail, so that you can enjoy the spectacle of a representation taking place that has nothing to do with being represented. Like. You want to just put someone up, see what happens. Hopefully they fuck up and it's like hilarious. Like maybe the Democrats did rig the election just so that they could not take responsibility for anything because they don't want to govern. Like they prove that every time that they have the opportunity to. They're like, I don't know, a public option wasn't a consensus idea in an adversarial legislative body.
Fourth?
I just couldn't. I don't know. You know, so this is the same party we're talking about. That was the strongest candidate that party has had in like my entire lifetime. So
easily.
Speaking of violence, though I was doing a quick search for stuff, and this is the only thing we got. Motherfucking Charlie Kirk, right?
Smirking Kirk
says your vote matters at real Donald Trump, and Democrats want to steal this election from you. Show up Friday, November 6th at 10 a.m. to protect your vote and help swing Arizona back to President Trump. Show up, fight back, hold the line. Now,
that's the most direct thing I think I've heard. People say Trump invokes political violence. He does kind of flirt with this or that.
Yeah, he flirts.
But that's maybe more direct than anything I've heard from Trump.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
I'm not like... Charlie Kirk doesn't stand in my mind as like the guy who's like going to bring violence. He's not like Patriot Front or like, you know, the Proud Boys or something. But like,
yeah, I mean,
but it's not Charlie Kirk who I'm worried about. It's the people who would also show up to that Charlie Kirk thing that is more concerning.
Well, I mean, like a bunch of Proud Boys got stabbed last night, so there's that. But like, that's been it. There's been no riots. There's been. And what the other thing is weird is everybody, all sides feel crestfallen, except for like weirdo left comms, like, you know, people adjacent to us. Really, some of them have been oddly like, everybody was wrong, you know, kind of.
What about the weirdos? Who would feel that way?
Like, but like, it seems crestfallen. Like the liberals on my wall here in the act.
Oh, Derek.
Yeah, we're losing Derek. I think what Derek's saying is that liberals on the wall are just posting a lot of feel-good cat photos to not think about it. Am I right?
Derek?
Yeah, sort of. Am I back?
Yes.
Yeah,
you're back. Yeah. But, you know, pictures of cute cats, right?
Okay.
Like,
what I was about to say is liberals were just, they were pretty crestfallen. Yeah.
Oh no! It's not allowing you to convey any meaning. You can only have that after comments. Oh, you heard it?
Yeah, liberals are pretty crestfallen.
Yeah, that's the message. Then yeah, like no, everyone is very, very upset.
Well, yeah, because the liberals are very crestfallen because America is not the country they hoped it was. Like the you know, it's basically what Tom was saying. Like, I'm not saying Tom's a liberal, but the thing is, like, what are you doing, right? Like the liberals are like, what are you doing here? Like, this is Donald Trump. He killed hundreds of thousands of Americans. What are you doing?
He told you to vote. You know what that means, right?
Yeah. Like, how many 9/11s do we need out here, people? You know, that's what the liberals are crestfallen about. It's just like, I don't get it. What is my country? What is happening here?
We did everything we possibly could. We lined up behind a senile rapist just to outflank a social candidate that had a vision. I mean, we did everything right. Like,
yeah.
Yeah. What could we have done to avert this, demoralizing, slow, sclerotic, American water torture election outcome?
Who knows?
Did everything right. I can't imagine a way forward.
They chose the most electable candidate. Clear.
Clearly.
Almost no one voted for him, but
yeah, right.
What you're saying is that the liberals on your wall are soy facing right now.
I think soy facing is when like the new Nintendo Switch product comes out and you're like, right? Like,
oh, right.
The left comms are soy facing.
left comms soy facing. There you go. That's the title for the stream.
Yeah, that's a jump upload. I've ever heard one.
Yeah, left com soy facing.
Yeah, being beyond the ultra left here, I'm of course not implicated. So we're all out of burgers here. We ate burgers during this. That's how American we are.
Mm-hmm. Soy burgers, but burgers.
But yeah. So
look,
we're new Americans.
American morale may be at an all-time low, but no one will abandon the burger.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right. My estrogen levels are at an all-time high.
Oh, we got dual Varn.
We got dual and Derek's.
Wow, you're back.
Will win.
Yeah.
Derek v. Derek.
I am on my extended.
We have a.
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Return of the Derek.
Return of Hellfire and Varnation.
You missed me make several cracks about soy.
Yeah, yeah. You missed the soy discourse.
So final thoughts, everyone. Wrap this one up.
Yeah, let's end this up.
Are we all fairly certain that Biden will win? First of all,
my position has always been that Biden would win. Since I'd say month and a half, 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Around the debate time I was like, Trump's not even running a campaign. Like this isn't. It was only at the very end there he started to do something that resembled a campaign, and I was like, this isn't like the last election. It just has nothing of the same energy that it had before. So I expected more or less this result, but I didn't know anything about any of the particulars. So I can't say, I called Pennsylvania or anything. No, it was just a gut. It's just a gut feeling based on last time versus this time. So yeah,
if I
expect a Biden win. I think the Democrats are, when they say they're more organized about legal challenges than they were in 2000, I believe they actually are. And they also have a stronger legal case than they had in 2000, because we're talking here about like original votes, not a recount. The recount thing is going against Trump, not for him this time.
Right.
Yeah. So looking at my final thoughts is looking at the electors right now. It's 264 to 215. There's almost no fucking way for Trump to he's got two paths, and they're not likely. Even if Pennsylvania falls red, it won't matter. Particularly with Nebraska having some split votes going to Biden. The other thing is, I was talking to a lawyer friend who said the same thing. There's not really standing on any of these issues in the way that there was in 2000. They would and we were talking about the dynamics of the court. While the court could throw it and it's stacked in a weird way, it is not just John Roberts, but most of the center right on the court who is terrified of being seen as a totally political animal and getting stacked. While that might not happen under a Republican Senate, John Roberts playing the long game and has been so far. Period. I mean, his weirdness in the rulings show that they want to be. They don't want to be the lapdog to Trump. They want to be the lapdog to Capitol.
Yeah.
And it is, like I said, like someone saying, never say never. There is a way. There are two ways for Trump to win, but they are highly unlikely. That said, Democrats should not feel good. Leftists shouldn't feel good. Rightists shouldn't feel good. Maybe maybe if I was Xi Jinping, I might feel okay. But I think in general, this is not like this result is both great for everybody, actually in a way, and terrible for everybody. We have to resist the copium hard. And we are going to have to play an oppositional role to Democrats. We have to, because the Democrats. Even one of the things I was pushing to someone else is like, you guys keep on talking about what you give, but the last experience we have of you rule, you had all the power of the federal government, all three branches, the largest Senate majority that any party has seen since the 40s, and you blew it in a year. Don't tell me that you actually want to rule and like that you really would offer more to the people and shame the American, because their last experience of you is you suck it.
Well, and they're going to push that line all the way from the beginning of Biden's term to the end. Is we can't do anything, our hands are tied. The pundits will say the same thing. They're going to focus on the partisan bickering in Congress. But we just can't buy that shit. It's just
they won't let us. But Kyle, they won't let us cover. We really want to, but we just can't.
Well,
yeah, the Obama's first term proves that that's a fucking lie.
Yes, and one other thing I want to say, or I want to put to the panel: which are the activist groups that have benefited from Orange Man bad that are going to be thrown under the bus once the Democrats are in government? Because they always do this.
Antifa's already been thrown under a bus. They're about to get, like I said.
Yeah, they're I've been the bus. They like built a new bus with like an Antifa like shaped hole in the bottom of it, like before.
Antifa steamroller.
No, they've been.
Yeah, it has like a cattle catcher with like just spread out with hoodies and blood from Portland.
Right.
Joe's riding on top.
No, Jack.
How do I operate forklift?
Anyone else going to be thrown under the bus, you think?
Oh, I think a lot of the anarchist groups are going to be thrown under the bus by social media conglomerates, which you think are largely captured by like center-rightist Dems. I mean, Jack Dorsey, like, I don't like to sound like I engage in conservative conspiracy mongering, but they're not entirely wrong on this. And it's already coming for us. It's going to get worse.
Yeah. Swampside chats cannot be found on Apple Podcasts.
Yeah. and so it's not going to happen today or tomorrow, but you'll see that. I also think I'm going to be interested in what these different BLM groups who are fighting for the representation of these where this is going pan out, particularly as I think woke capitalism, which we haven't mentioned that much, is going to really try to suck them up. And some of those people are going to sell each other out. It's going to be real sad, but it reminds me. I mentioned the New Jersey conference, like in the 70s, because a similar thing happened. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, find your local good Black Lives Matter chapter and prepare to do some like moral support of people getting totally thrown under the bus. It's like maybe not a terrible thing to do with your time.
Right.
I mean, it actually might not be as bad as if the Democrats had run the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
But so there's that. So there's that moderating power.
It's like 50-50 in the Senate right now.
Yeah.
48-48, I should say.
It's 48-48. It's almost certain that the Dems aren't going to take it. It also, they're going to keep the House, but they lost some seats. So.
Right. But we all know 50 Democratic senators doesn't mean 50 Democratic senators anyway.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, even with Harris breaking ties.
So what do you think?
Yeah.
What do we look at? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree with Antifa. I think my hot take is that like
Antifa.
Yes. Sorry.
Antifa. Oh, agreeing about Antifa. Sorry.
Yeah, agreeing with what you said about Antifa. But my hot take is that I think in an important way, this is actually good for us. The best of any possible scenario, right? Because the Democrats are in a uniquely weak position for us to oppose them. We have to remain oppositional, right? But because they can't do anything, we're going to be able to point that out and be, this is your grand, like, anti-fascist hero. This is your grand anti-fascist triumph. It's this fucking senile, former segregationist, like, rapist. I think we can do better. You know, call me crazy.
What, are you some kind of communist or something?
Yeah, exactly. And so I think in an important way, this is actually best case scenario, because, like, you know, and also hot take, like, it is going to be, like, slightly better in some very minor ways, but in some ways that will impact some lives in a meaningful way, if that makes any sense. Some minor policy tweaks will impact some people.
I hope so.
Well, what we're going to end up, like, let's look at the immigration, which is something that, like, really gave me some pause and maybe almost vote for Joe. Like, I really, like, sat and, like, thought about it and read through some things. Like, what's probably going to end up happening is that as long as there's a political will, right, which is a big if, or actually, let me back up. As far as I understand it, the Remain in Mexico policy is an executive action, right? That's something that a Biden administration can undo. It might be challenged, but that it is relatively easy to get that done. And Biden has said that that's something he wants to do. Remain in Mexico is the thing that gets, like, trans people who are asylum seekers and, you know, different, all kinds of people who are running from some very scary shit back in Mexico where they're most likely killed. That's not nothing.
Family separation and that sort of thing as well.
But I also feel like what we're going to see is that they're going to clean up the concentration camps on the border, and they're going to continue.
Yes, absolutely.
With, you know, woke approval, with woke Democratic approval instead
they'll be wearing masks and have, like, access to bathrooms and soap, which is, you know, not nothing, but like.
But that wasn't
it's
what
still
people,
running.
It's not what people were saying about concentration camps. You know, a concentration camp with better policies, I would see from liberals on Twitter.
Yeah.
Still,
I remember being at a Nazi concentration camp in Czech Republic, and, you know, seeing the propaganda they put out, like, oh, the prisoners are playing soccer with each other. It's nice, you know. This is a place for Jews, you know.
Right.
Because this was one of the camps that was processing Jews and not the camps that were processing all the other people the Nazis wanted to kill. So, you know, 5 steps above that, I guess, in terms of quality of life for being in a concentration camp.
Yeah, so, I mean, hey, all right, you know, Sleepy Joe, like, you want to do something about that? Now's your chance. Now's your chance to show, you know, the moral consequences of a Democrat winning the presidency. And of course, I'm saying this with a kind of smug tone, but I would like to see things get better for those people. And my smugness is coming from a sense of anger, where, like, I wanted Obama to close Guantanamo. He didn't close Guantanamo. That feels like the same kind of humanitarian, like, executive order kind of police state shit that very easily could have been changed by just a single moral pushing up and coming out of the president's mouth and flopping onto his desk.
Do you think there's going to be more military action against militia people, given that they have a Republican Senate to kind of clean it up? Because I actually do wonder about that. Like, and I'm not saying that because I want it or don't want it, although I do think the expansion of terrorism laws in general is bad for everybody, particularly the proletariat. But like
anything they do against the right, they will do twice as hard against the left. It was you who pointed out to me that the what was the McCarthyist thing? The
House of Un-American Activities Committee.
Yeah, the House of Un-American Activities Committee was, like, at first an anti-Nazi apparatus. And so if they expand these, if they go after right-wing militias, which they'll have somewhat of a popular mandate to do after all of the insanity of the Trump administration. People are kind of sick of that shit. They have the mandate to do that, and they'll probably at first just target right-wing militias. But I still have friends who are involved in some form of left-wing militia or other, and like, you know, if they really start going after militias, I'm going to be afraid for my friends, even if it's just the bad ones. Right. So
yeah, I'm worried about that too. I remember a lot of the when stuff started happening under Obama and even under Bush, they were looking at right-wing terrorism and immediately pivoted to going after environmental activists multiple times, and that was worse under Bush, but it happened under both Bush and Obama. And so I would not be surprised if we see that. We're not going to see as much of that targeted environmental activists because like Alf and Elf were so thoroughly crushed. But
felt demoralized, and some of them are producing excellent podcasts like Fight Like an Animal.
Yeah, but it is what it is. I also think we're gonna see a lot of growth in anarchism out of a lot of this because a lot of people do feel burnt by the Marxists lockstepping into Bernie or trying to game it out and not producing anything. Right. But I also think like the anarchism we're seeing is incoherent. Like it's not even coherent for anarchism. And I don't say this as a slight to anarchists. Like I actually, people who know me privately know that as much shit as I talk about anarchists, I pull a lot from them about the problems of Marxists. I'm a little bit worried for their incoherence and then them getting caught up in sweeps. And I'm going to be interested in the way the immigration regime works because the one thing I think that the Democrats might have learned from this with like Latino support for harsher immigration policies being not like kind of a thing is they might try to pivot right. I already see the congressional Democrats trying to pivot right, even though the squad and the DSAers had success. I think we already see that they're gonna blame the strategy. We know what they're gonna do because I saw growth in right suburban voters. So, I mean, I don't know. I feel weirdly, the more I talk, the more I went from feeling moralized that everyone was wrong and my left-com superiority smugness kicking in, and then being demoralized about the future hellscape world that we're all going to live in, and our hyper-capitalist Chinese warlords that I'm going to, serve in the future. So
stick to epistemology. That'll make you feel good. Don't think about, human cost of any of this. I mean, it crossed my mind when we were talking about problematic ways of just lumping together demographics and thinking that all immigrants support one immigration policy. Well, you're going to feel real dumb if you look into the demographic data on that. But just to summarize, my position is that I do think Biden. I do think Biden is going to pull through. But let me tell you how I arrived at this process, and I think you'll understand why I find this kind of frightening. In 2016. I thought Trump was going to win for most of the time. Then 2 weeks before the election, I checked 538 and I checked Real Clear Politics. And I was like, oh shit, it doesn't, one out of three chance, Nate Silver. Look at all these polls going for Hillary. I mean, that is a small margin. Well, maybe Hillary's going to carry it, I guess, So then I had a real nice eventful election night being like, whoa, wrong. And let me tell you about my completely different experience this year where, I was kind of not sure because, wow, there's a lot of really crazy shit happening with Trump, but Trump's in power and he's kind of tied to, the management of the crisis of coronavirus and the economic crisis. And, there's all this stuff going against him. But I guess there's a lot of stuff going against Trump in the campaign, too. Surely that stuff's going to stick, But, I don't know. I still kind of think Trump could pull it off. And then I checked out 538 and Real Clear Politics. And I saw, well, it's a 1 in 10 chance this time that Trump will carry it this time. And, wow, well, if you look at these, all this polling with Biden, it's not just 2 or 3 points. We're talking about 5 or 7 points, maybe 8 sometimes. That's beyond the margin of error. So, yeah, maybe Biden will carry it. And I was just this close, teensy weensy little bit, that close from being exactly wrong in the exact same way as I was in 2016. After doing all of this, political kind of groping and theorizing and podcasting, people are listening to me. Hi, thank you. And, and still pretty much came to the conclusion, still pretty much the same way. And I'm right this time, so I don't have to rethink anything. All right, so we're gonna.
Yeah, my
actual takeaway from that is that I'm, I don't know, I have to like go study something, or else my brain's just gonna like fall out of my ears or something. So I'm gonna be looking for like better ways to think about these things and like try to measure political reality, because of how how misleading a lot of this stuff can be, and how like I don't know. There's just got to be better ways of understanding the world than we have put in front of us. I kind of just think there are.
My reason for thinking Joe Biden was going to win was not so much Nate Silver, although I did buy for the last week. I was like, well, maybe they've adjusted their priors enough.
I didn't even think of that at all. It was all about the margin of error for me. It was like, this is, because I mean,
Come on now. You know what happened to psychology because of that.
+7. I mean, for Hillary, it was +1, +3, +2, and I made sure I looked back and forth. I was like, these are bigger pluses.
Yeah, this is a big one. That's a small one.
Like,
yeah,
and hey, maybe I'll still be wrong. Maybe I'll still be wrong, and I'm still in ideology land because I thought we're doing science, but I don't know. I try to adjust for, whatever error there is in that worldview. And like, there's only so much you can do. That's what's available. That's the media that's available. I used to believe that Marxists should build up some sort of alternative media. After seeing what that looks like for the most part, I don't know if we should be doing that kind of God building. Just get a Marxist MSNBC and get the Marxist Nate Silver and just like recapitulate the whole apparatus. Like, I don't think that's a good idea.
Can I be the Marxist Honey Lauren?
You can be the Marxist Honey Lauren.
So you don't think the majority report is our future, huh? Like,
I mean, if we're lucky, the majority reports our future. Shit.
Well, I mean, it is nice for a failed comic to become a quasi left winger as opposed to a quasi right winger for once. But like,
hey, he knows H. John Benjamin. That's pretty cool. He was on Home Movies. He was fucking Sam Cedar was Fenton from Home Movies.
Yes, I know.
Right?
Sam Cedar was also, like Mark Maron, but actually had some political backbone. But I also remember the Air America days, so because I'm old. I don't know. My thing is, I think, yes, Trump could technically still win it through a court. I don't think the court battle is likely. I'm tired. I am going through hyper periods of elation and depression in the same sentence. Like, I'm like, everyone's wrong. Everyone's wrong. Everyone's wrong. Everyone's wrong. Like,
the dialectic is dialectic has us, comrades.
Feel the dialectic. I think that's as good a place to leave it off as any.
Comrades, give me your energy.
Yeah.
Spirit bomb.
Send your organ through the chat.
Speaking of which, bringing up the specter of
William Wright.
The chat's wilding. I'll just say that.
The chat's definitely wild. I just want to thank the chat. Benjamin
Thank you, chat.
Grimlock, Jay Price, Spectral Theory, Jeremy Salmon. Am I pronounced that right? I'm going to say Salmon just in case I didn't. Let's see. We got Grimlock. We got, more Jeremy. We got Eola. Oh my God. Eloy Lemma. Wow. We're across platforms here. We got Stank.
Stank.
Too bad Tom wasn't here. He loves to say Stank. James Flynn. We got Superstar Crasher. Yeah, we are cross-platform here. Mm-hmm. We got YouTube and Twitch. Damn. Some Facebook. Mateo. let's see. Y'all are real talkative, actually. Holy fucking shit!
Chat was wilding.
Chat was wild. We got Jake's second name. That sounds like a real name. Hansu48. We got well, I guess this was 3 hours, wasn't it? Well, how about that? I'm gonna give you that follow from Twitch. Who, by the way, has been watching too much NBA and thought Kyle was Klay Thompson. Oh, yeah.
I'm the worst baller you'll ever see. I'm a terrible basketball player.
What's really fun is that they're Canadian too and was confused what was happening in the election, who's winning. The election looks like my math test that I failed. So God bless. Benjamin Handshoe, who's dropping truth bombs in the comments. Adam Atkins, Booyah! Booyah!
Booyah!
Glenn Helton, Pepino, many numbers, Adam Atkins, and I think that's as far as StreamYard will let me see. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Everybody, please partake in your drug of choice or meditation or do whatever like kind of indulgent self-care thing you can because you deserve it. Anyway.
Smoke crack, worship Satan.
Yeah, I'd like to thank our guests too, who aren't with us, and all the other podcasters who came in, including Tom, Jason Miles from This Revolution podcast brought a real feel for the first 45 minutes. It was nice to like not be super nerdy and still talk about this.
That was great. We should talk about him. We should talk with him again. Since we didn't get that much of a chance to pick his brain.
He told me to tell you guys that he really likes you, and we're glad that we found each other's orbit. I'm glad to get JG Michael on to talk about because JG Michael is like that motherfucker interviews everybody you talk about like high information. He's always calling me, maybe talk about why don't leftists know more about foreign policy and who's taking money from whom? I just talked to this other person and they know this and this, and I'm like, yeah, because being a journalist is hard, man. I tried it once.
It is. It really is.
That's the This Is Revolution podcast and the Parallax Views podcast. The word that means first and second in that order. I was once interviewed for the Parallax Views podcast, and I think I was a little too incoherent to get on. Anyway, but also we got Comandante Alpha from Alpha to Omega. We got Jake from Swampside Chats, and I think that's
shout out to Zero Books and Doug because he's going to release it when we release it as a podcast.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you,
Zero Books. He's going to
release this also on Zero.
Thank you very much. Good luck on Sky tonight.
Yeah, he was on Sky. Well, I think he was on Sky this morning, and it went. He said he was on for like 30 seconds or something.
Right. Well, it's longer than we were on Sky.
Yeah. So there we go. That's everybody.
That's everybody.
I'm gonna go have a nice Coke because I drank too much last night in despair.
Charlotte's Web CBD cubes with lemon balm for calming.
Sponsor us, please.
Yes. The Impossible Whopper won't. Anyway.
I like the Impossible Whopper. Okay, we're done.
Good night, y'all.
Bye.